Hello and welcome! Welcome to my video of why Mario & Luigi Brothership disappointed me. Mario & Luigi Brothership came out of November 2024. Today, around 1 year later, November in 2025, I wish to talk about why the game disappointed me. In terms of my history with the franchise, it started with me playing Bowser's Story as a kid on the Nintendo DS. And I've also had history with the franchise outside of that, at continuing on play other games in the franchise. In terms of ones I own, Bowser's Story, Dream Team, and Paper Jam are all games that I own. So when Alpha Dream eventually went under, unfortunately, the article actually came out on my birthday, which was kind of sad to see as somebody who's been a fan of the franchise. It was unfortunate to see, but eventually the trailer came out showing that Mario & Luigi was coming back as a franchise, and the title was going to be called Mario & Luigi Brothership. And I was beyond excited. Nobody really wanted to love the game more than me. So then I played it, and unfortunately, it did not live up expectations of me specifically. Feels like I'm not the only person disappointed by it. Generally speaking, it seems like people either think the game is very good, or just, decent, per se. They have issues with it. And I'm more on the category of, I think it's just a decent game, but I have my qualms with it. And today is me going into depth of why I think this. And in terms of the structure of the video, it is going to be, I'm going to be scaling in terms of what I think is the smallest to biggest issues. I'm starting off with the smallest issues and then going to the biggest. So I will start off with a section where I am talking about smaller grievances, then I will go to talk about some of the positives of the game, before diving into some bigger problems scaling up from there. So, without further ado, let's get started with the video. Here's why Mario & Luigi Brothership disappointed me. If you may have noticed, this video is really, really long. But it is a video essay after all. You know how it goes with video essays. The person's gonna be talking for a long, long time. No, but in all seriousness, I did actually have a lot to say. And also, regarding timestamps, if you do not see them in the video itself, I will make a pinned comment in the description below for your viewing convenience. With that being said, let's get it going. It's going to be quite the ride, so strap in. We're first going to start off by talking about the minor grievances with the game. Now before I start, there's one thing I want to talk about the structure of how this video was scripted. This video has a bunch of different notes and points that I've written down for every single section, and many of which in explicit detail. However, I don't have every single sentence planned out for exactly how I wish to word it. So this video is going to be loosely scripted. The reason for this approach is, well, I just want to end up not sound like a robot basically. So I hope this approach works well. Anyway, let's get started with the video, starting with, like I said, talking about the minor grievances of the game. Now getting into the first part of this video, I will talk about what I find to be the smaller grievances of the game. Now the reason I chose to title this section Smaller Grievances instead of Nitpicks is nitpicks are things that I feel like are smaller things that really don't matter all too much. Smaller grievances are basically just like minor issues in terms of, I do think these things matter just to a much smaller degree, which is why we're starting off with this section. The first thing that I would like to discuss is the loading times in this game. The loading times when doing things like engaging in a battle or being shot out of a cannon is something that can take quite a bit of time. It wasn't too annoying for me personally, but I would still definitely consider this a minor negative, for sure. In terms of loading times after the bomb derby, which is a bro attack, after you get an excellent hit, the game will just slow down for several seconds after this. And these things could be better on the Switch too, but it is something that I still definitely would want to point out as a negative, because this game came out on the Switch 1, it released on the Switch 1, and it was an issue back then when it released. So I do think this is something that I would paint in a negative light. The overall performance otherwise, though, I would say is fine. And from my experience, and seemingly from other people's experiences as well, the only things I've noticed is the lag after the bomb derby and those slow loading times when being engaging in the battle, being shot out of a cannon, or things like that. In terms of Luigi moving around on his own, that is the next talking point that I would like to say. And in terms of just walking around, I don't really mind this personally. In terms of gameplay and how Luigi moving automatically affects the puzzle element of this game, this is something that I would like to return to later in the video. In terms of just walking around, where Luigi just automatically follows you, and instead of maybe having to press the B button to jump over a ledge or something, he just does that by himself automatically. I do think that is okay. The element of he will just jump over a ledge or something himself. Now, in terms of the dungeons, lining up the plugs is something that I would say is a minor complaint, as there would be many times where I try to drop a plug, but it won't let me because I'm just oh, you're slightly on the platform where the plug would go, so you gotta step back, and then maybe you try to maneuver yourself around, and then you can't do it there either because Luigi is slightly on the platform. It's gotta be lined up perfectly, and this is something that will be a little annoying whenever you go to a dungeon. It definitely got a little annoying for me personally. The next thing I want to talk about is Luigi accessing his attack menu with the A button and then attacking with the B button instead of them both being a B is something that is not big enough to detract my enjoyment from the game, but trying to access his menu with B before thinking for a split second that you can not do that and you have to access his menu with the A button and then attack him with B is something that I had many times throughout the game, because I'm just I was thinking that I can, oh yeah, I can access his menu with the B button. I'm just oh wait, no, I can't do that. This is Mario & Luigi Brothership. I have to access it with the A button. If you've been playing the franchise for a long period of time, it can become muscle memory at that point. And even when you get very deep into the game, like endgame, it is just still naturally muscle memory. So it's not something that even super deep in the game, it's not something that I quite got used to. There would be many times throughout the story where Luigi or Snoutlet would force you to complete sections immediately that don't really need to be done right that second, which I feel is really annoying, because the cutscene would still take place whenever I get there anyway. A minor complaint, but it was pretty annoying throughout my playthrough. The first time I can think of this as an example is when I first unlocked the Brawl Ball attack on Lot of Coins Island. Now, there is a pipe that you will be able to see before you get to where Peach is where you can, where you would use the Brawl Ball later to take that pipe and get up to the section where the boss battle on this island is going to be. However, if you try to do it before you go to Peach and talk to her after just she is leaving the area or being released from that prison, or Luigi if you chose to make Luigi go to the island instead, then this is something that you would not be able to do. Luigi and Snoutlet would force you to just be hey, you need to go see Peach now. And if it's Peach that you chose, if it's Luigi you chose, you would still not be able to do something like this because you would still be forced by Snoutlet to just be hey, you need to actually go over and see this person first. And that was pretty annoying. Another example is when you're chasing Ken down in Slippenglide, you cannot continue exploring the island until you finish chasing him down, because there's a section where you will get to this research facility in Slippenglide, and then Ten will just run out of this section and go over to a cliff on Slippenglide, and it's just oh, you have to chase him down this very moment. You can't just go explore the island for a while and then come back, even though you know that this is a video game and Ten will still be there near the end of the cliff, and the cutscene will play out when you actually get there. Another section where this is an example is the cutscene with Buddy and Bowser Jr., where in the back of the castle, that one section where Buddy is going to get hit with cologne, just in order to just try to save Bowser Jr. Once you know that he's back there, you have to go back there and engage in that cutscene. You can't just explore the castle and just go out there, which is really weird because, again, not only is this a video game, and I find it weird that I have to engage in the cutscene right away instead of just being able to explore the area, but also these islands are not something that you can just leave until you finish exploring the area in the first place. So it doesn't really make that much sense to me. Because if you are unfamiliar with Mario & Luigi Brothership and how it works is that you have to finish an island before you are able to leave the location. You have to finish the island and connect the island, or you just have to finish whatever is going on in that island in order to leave the area. So it's not something that you can just you could just warp and leave. You can only warp and leave the area and return to Shipshape when you have actually completed that island, or completed what you need to do with that island. Which is why I find it strange that the game just doesn't just let me explore the location and then go to the cutscene or play it out. It's not like I can leave this island anyway. Now, in terms of Luigi following you, there is one thing that I would like to bring up as a minor complaint, and there could be some times where you have to stop dead in your tracks for a bit, because there's a scene where Luigi is a little bit too far behind, and there's this little animation where he just calls out Mario's name. Mario calls out his name, he says let's go, and just jumps up and down, and then you can continue playing the game. It does mess with the pacing a little bit. Luigi's too far back. There would just need to be an animation if he's too far back that will have to play before they just join together, instead of Luigi just joining up with you, which he does do on many occasions, but there may be some times where he's just too far back and this little cutscene plays out. Again, it's a very minor thing. It's not a huge deal. I just find it weird, and it could take up a few seconds and mess with the pacing a little bit, but it's not something that is likely to happen too often. So it's definitely not a huge deal in the slightest. What is a huge deal in terms of messing with pacing is the Luigi's logic playing a cutscene where he has to think about the solution for 10 seconds before it's explained what he's going to do, or where he puts himself or gets himself in a position to be able to do something. This can be really annoying, because when there's an ability Luigi can magically do one time and only one time, where there was better ways to convey how a section works, is an example of when this is one of the examples of when this is annoying. For example, there's a section where there are levers in Rainforest Island, and there's one section that's really high up that you can't jump to, so Luigi has a Luigi logic moment where he has to think about it, and he just suddenly gains the ability to float up to this section. And it's really weird, because how it's just this is an ability that you can do once and only once, and you could have just lowered the level and go back down to it's somewhere that you can reach. And if you really needed to demonstrate how these things work, you could just have an enemy use this lever to go up to another section. And why would it be doing that? It may be this enemy is chasing down a toad, because you do find toads in Rainforest Island that are stuck up on certain ledges. So maybe an enemy like the lizard, for example, just uses his tongue or something to just hold down the lever and shoot himself up to chase after the toad, and then you chase after him and then engage in this cutscene, and then engage in this battle with him. Well, there's a cutscene and then you do the battle, and then this is how you demonstrate how you use the levers in Rainforest Island throughout the rest of the area. That would be a better way to convey how this works. Another example of Luigi gaining an ability that he can magically do one time and only one time is there's a section like Rumba Island where he can just squeeze through a wall one time and only one time. While in other Mario and Luigi games, what would happen is that you would hammer another brother, and in a game like Partners in Time, you can get flattened, or a brother in other entries would get smaller, or you would be hammered underground. When they're underground, you can move them, and then they can pop out above the ground when you pass a gate, and that's the only way that you can pass a gate like this. If you wanted a new bro ability, it could just be like a frisbee or something, where you could just throw him through the gaps in the gate, and the frisbee could be something that ends up being interesting, where it's just, oh, you're throwing this frisbee, and maybe there's some elements like wind, some enemies that you have to avoid, because there are other bro attacks like this, or bro abilities like this, where you actually have to keep in mind the wind or just what enemies are up there in the sky, and you have to evade them. So if you really want to do something with that later, it could just be like a frisbee or something like that, and the difficulty of where it's used and how it's used increases throughout different sections throughout the game, instead of it being an ability where he squeezes through the section one time and only one time, and it's a whole 10-second cutscene has to play, and I'm just like, why is this here in the first place? It just makes me question what was the point of having this game, or if it wasn't for any ability that you're gonna be able to use multiple times in the game and it's gonna be important to the game. It's just something that Luigi can use one time and only one time, and then just never again. Another example of when this is annoying is when he has to think about a solution to something that is very obvious. When the idol kid is stuck in a hole in a desolate island, he has to think for like 10 seconds in order to just be like, hey, why don't we just hammer him out? And it would be a little bit more interesting if it was one of those attacks where Mario and Luigi have to hammer together, because that is something that's also been done sometimes, where you would have to hammer together in order to have enough power to whack something. And I'm just like, if this is an ability that comes up multiple times later in the game, then that could be interesting, but no, it wasn't that. It was just, oh, you could just push them out, instead, and that's the solution. Instead of, like, Mario and Luigi have to hammer them out together, no, it's not like a new ability or something like that. And again, it's really obvious that you just push them out of the hole. Why'd I need a whole cutscene just thinking through this? Again, especially if I'm not learning anything new. It's okay in battles, because in boss battles, this cutscene doesn't last for nearly as long, and it's okay when it pops up when you're learning a new ability, like I said before, because in boss battles and when you're learning a new ability, it has actual reasons why this thing is popping up in the first place. There are different animations that end up playing whenever the Luigi logic thing happens, and it is charming, but even so, the amount of times that Luigi has to think for an extended period of time can get annoying. And if you do say that it's just like, oh, well, I mean, it's only for like 10 seconds, and you're just like, yeah, that's true, but again, it pops up a lot throughout the game, so it does get like pretty annoying when you're playing throughout the game because of how many times it appears in the game. An example of this being like something that can be condensed and would just be much greatly appreciated is compare an older Zelda game like Ocarina of Time comparing to one of the newer ones like Tears of the Kingdom. In Tears of the Kingdom, when you just open a chest, but a little jingle plays, it just shows what the item is, like a little description, and then that's it. In Ocarina of Time, there has to be a whole build-up where it plays the entire jingle, and then Link holds it up, and then the description is there. And it's something that doesn't need to be nearly as long as it is, especially because a lot of these items that you get in Ocarina of Time don't really need all this build-up, because most of the time it's not even an item that deserves that level of build-up. So it would be much more preferable if it was just condensed, which it has been in later installments. And that is something that I would consider a minor complaint of a game like Ocarina of Time as well, in comparison to a new game like Tears of the Kingdom. Now, in terms of character design, that's another thing that I would take a minor issue with, not with the Mario Brothers, many of the residents of Concordia, because those are good, and I'll talk more about those in positive detail later in the positive section of this video that is coming up very shortly. I want to talk about the stylization of Bowser's minions. Of Bowser's minions, I feel like the stylization that they have could have been a lot more Mario and Luigi-esque, and that the stylization of those characters could have been a lot more interesting. They look very similar to how they look in like other installments. They don't really have more of a Mario and Luigi stylization. But I would like them to have more of a Mario and Luigi stylization than what they currently do end up having. And to show an example of this, I will show two enemies, Shy Guy and Koopa, and Mario and Luigi Brothership, and I'll also show them Mario Party Jamboree just to show how they look in two different Switch 1 titles, and how they could have had more of a Mario and Luigi stylization, but they don't, and they end up looking pretty similar to how they look in other titles. So that's it for the smaller issues of the game. Part 2, like I said before, is when we're going to get into some of the positives of the game, which I'll be talking about right now. A quick editor's note before we move on to part 2 of the video. I would also like to say I don't think the humor is good in this game at all. A lot of characters have a gimmick, and the game's humor just doesn't land most of the time, and they will repeat the same quote-unquote joke multiple times with characters. The worst offenders are characters like Snoutlet, Extension, Corpse, and Zocket. Snoutlet was funny exactly one time when he was backing away from Zocket, otherwise he's painfully unfunny. Also, I'm going to talk about the game's quote-unquote attempts at talking about humor a few times throughout this video. Now it's time for the second part of the video where I talk about the positives of the game, And the main things that stick out to me, and there's the battles and the gameplay positives. If there's anything that Mario and Luigi Brothership does really, really well, it's the battles. The battle system is something that I would say is the best in the entire series up to this point. And in order to talk about the battles and the battle system, I'm first going to start off with the plugs, which I feel like is a gimmick that adds a lot to the game. There are several plugs that you can get throughout the game that all with a bunch of different effects, and these things add a ton of things to battles. Not only because they have a bunch of different battle effects, but they also have limited uses. So you can run out of uses of a certain plug, which I think is really good for adding depth to the game and also a resource that can run out. So there's resource management added to the game. And also there are certain effects that can also work well with each other. For example, there's one plug where when you get an excellent attack off of a jump or hammer attack, for example, there's spread damage. And any enemy that gets hit with the spread damage, if you also have the spike ball effect on, spike balls will also land on them after the attack, adding more damage afterwards. Also, another thing about plugs is some of these specific enemies have weaknesses. Something like a Snapter, for example, is weaker to jump attacks. So you can get a critical jump attacks and jump effects to do even more damage, which also adds a lot to the gameplay as well. If there's one thing that I feel like could make them better, it's the way the resource management works. Because you kind of just have to burn all the uses in order for the charge to restart. What would make more sense is if around 80% are done through the usage of an effect, you can choose to start the cooldown counter a little bit earlier. So not that you have the effect immediately, but the cooldown effect starts so you don't have to use the last 2 usages in order for it to run out, and then now the cooldown restarts. You could restart it a little bit earlier if you are mostly done with the usage for convenience purposes, while also keeping the resource management element intact. And next I want to talk about the Gloam and the theming of the Gloam. And while I do have my issues with it, which I will talk about later, I like how the Gloam is integrated into battles. Basically what Gloam does is whenever somebody is affected by Gloam, they will no longer want to be around anybody else. And in battles, Mario and Luigi typically work together, but if one of them is inflicted by Gloam, they can no longer work with the other brother and they work with themselves. The only way that this is something that will be removed is from the ant berries that can heal this effect, which you will get way later on in the game, and refresh herbs, which have a 50-50 chance. But you also do start getting affected by Gloam in battles around the time where ant berries are things that you can use. Generally speaking, I think this is a really cool way of integrating the theming of how Gloam affects the gameplay and also integrating it into battles, which I think is really good. Another thing that I like about the game is the animations of characters like Mario and Luigi are really charming. They have little idle animations, and if you just don't do an action for a while, you could also just see there are different camera shots, and it's really cool. They just have their dancing effects, and also the way Mario and Luigi are animated as well. Their whole Mario and Luigi art style looks really nice on them. And also, I love the idea of the theming of the connections also being integrated into the designs of the characters. Because the designs of the characters, they are designed to look like outlets. And I think that's a really cute touch. Also, how you have plugs that connect the areas together. The theme is about connections, and their plugs which connect to each other, and it's all about connecting the island with these plugs. All these things go into the theme of the game. The visuals mesh with it quite nicely, because there will be plugs that connect all the islands together, which is really nice in order for the visuals adding to the theme of the game. Enemy variety is also something that is really good in this game. Generally good in the Mario and Luigi series, and this game is no exception. There's a lot of enemy variety in the types of enemies that you will fight, and the bosses themselves are great. They are really fun, and this is where Luigi logic shines, especially because how Luigi logic will work is sometimes Luigi will just get an idea based on something that's in the background. and if you successfully have this Luigi logic attack, you can get an opening. There's really cool interactivity in that, and I think that's a really cool integration of Luigi's logic that adds a ton to boss battles. So in terms of all these things are all things that I really like about Brothership, and I really wanted to take a section to just praise these things, because I did want to talk about some of the positives, like a lot of the main positives that stick out to me, and make a full section dedicated to this. So this is the end of the part 2 section, the battles and the gameplay positive sections of the video. And now we're going to go into part 3 of the video. Very quick editor's note before we move over to part 3. Although the positives for Mario & Luigi Brothership that I forgot to mention was literally like home console therefore. And I know that doesn't really sound that good, I'm just because it's a home console. Not necessarily, but it's actually more so because you get to use a controller. And using the controller honestly makes the usage of using like some bro attacks honestly feel like a lot nicer. Compare using Bomb Derby on a circle pad in Dream Team or Paper Jam versus using an attack like that in Brothership. Just having a controller feels so much nicer, you have no idea. It adds a bunch to the experience, genuinely. So that is another positive that I want to mention really quick before moving on to part 3. Now it's time for part 3 of the video, which is the music portion of the video. This was by far the hardest section to try to convey exactly how I feel about the music. You may be thinking that this got its own section because it's a positive section that I need to give its own section in order to convey my thoughts, and that is not the case in terms of it being a positive section, because the music in this game is not something I'm particularly a fan of, and that's kind of unexpected because when I think about Mario soundtracks, for the most part, I think Mario soundtracks are pretty consistently good in terms of all the tracks, or most of the tracks in a bunch of games. It doesn't necessarily reach the same highs as something like maybe a Sonic game, for example, but generally speaking, Mario music is pretty good. There are some games that do less musically, some of the sports games, especially some of the ones that you can clearly tell where there's less effort put into a game like this, for example. But generally speaking, the music in Mario is pretty good, so it was kind of hard to explain why I don't really like the music in Mario & Luigi Brothership. Keep in mind, however, when I say I don't like it, that doesn't mean I think it's bad. I just think a good chunk of the music is okay, but it has a hard time standing out. There are a few tracks that I think are good, obviously, but generally speaking, I do think the entire soundtrack as a whole would kind of suffer from not being able to stand out, even the good tracks, and I wanted to try to articulate why I feel this way, and this was a section of the script that I had to retool many times, but I think I figured out how I want to convey this in the script, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to use some music examples from Brothership's music, some good examples of songs that I do like, and some examples of an example of a song later where I'm less positive toward. But going through this entire video, I will be comparing Brothership songs and other Mario songs and trying to convey the grievances that I do have with Brothership's entire soundtrack as a whole, even the tracks that I think are better. Anyway, now it's time to get into part 3. Now that we've established how we're going to go about the structure of this video. So let's get started. Starting off, I'm going to be playing 3 examples, all snow themes. One's going to be from Mario & Luigi Paper Jam, one's going to be from Brothership, and one is going to be from Mario Odyssey. These are all snow themes that I think are good, so I'm just going to let these play out, and afterwards we'll have a discussion on 3 main points that I do want to talk about during the music portion of this video, which will lead to conveying my grievances and talking about other examples. So let's start with the first track that I'm going to play for you being Mount Burr. MK8, that was the first one. Up next we got Slippenglide. I'm gonna play that one for you next. Alright, that was the second one. Now the third one I'm going to play for you is Shiveria, so let's get to the third one. Now I've played 3 songs, and there are 3 things that I want to talk about. Moving pieces, flexibility, and instrumentation, and what a song wishes to convey. First thing I want to talk about is the feelings that a song either is trying to convey, wishes to convey, or what I think it conveys. Mount Burr captures the feeling of sorrow and the feeling of isolation present in a snow and ice theme, but also the hopeful feeling in them at the same time. It's a beautiful and serene ice theme that does a really great job of standing out and leaving an identity, while also being more flexible with instrumentation in compared to a theme like Slippenglide. Slippenglide is a very pleasant theme that strikes me as like a snow town theme. Strikes me as a bit cozy, and a bunch of people live here. But then we have a theme like Shiveria, for example, which also has a snow town theme, but also conveyed a jolly vibe based on the locations like Russia and Siberia, to a lesser extent Scandinavia, and it has a very Nordic/Celtic folk vibe. inspired music theme which blends very well with the theming of the location. Now you could say that a lot of Mario tracks, or some of them, feel like they have less inspiration or less interesting inspiration behind them than something like Shiveria. But overall, I do feel like the ones that do feel like they have less inspiration are more flexible with their instrumentation, and more flexible with instrumentation across the entire soundtrack. Brothership does not feel as flexible with instrumentation across the entire soundtrack, which I feel can hurt the soundtrack as a whole. Now, while I do like a theme like Slippenglide, the general thing that I've noticed about other soundtracks in this game is that moving pieces never really go far enough to make an impact or stick with you, and this game in general with its music has also limited the instrument options that they use, a point that I will get back to in a bit, since luckily we have ways of viewing the thought process of the music direction and production behind this game through interviews, and I will be looking at an interview and a piece of the interview later in this section and in a later section later in the video as well, because if I'm going to be a hater, I'm going to be a professional hater about this. Very quickly, what I want to say about moving pieces, and to explain what I mean by moving pieces, is the parts of a track that makes it feel like the track is progressing, but feels fitting with the rhythm of the song or track that you want to give off or build towards. Now that I established that, back to the limiting pool of some of the instrumentation used in this game. The limiting pool, I feel, is limited to a point where I feel like it's a detriment, and from some of that pool, a commonly used instrument in the soundtrack, like an accordion for example, can be used in, we can see that it's used in areas like Shipshape, Rumbla, a lot of coins building, Slippenglide, All Sand, Heat Freeze, Merry-Go, and an instrument like the accordion isn't as flexible as some other instruments commonly used in Mario soundtracks, or just commonly used instrumentation in general. Things like guitars, violins, pianos, for example, instruments that you commonly hear but do have more flexibility in what you try to convey with them to make the usage of these instruments stand out more. I use the accordion as an example because it's more easily distinguishable than some other instruments. Then in terms of instruments that are more flexible used, and when there's a unique vibe presented for a location, say Desolate Island is a great example, has an interesting vibe as a desert town, but musically it doesn't really feel like it goes anywhere, and as such it also doesn't really stick with you. And in other tracks that feel like they are less unique in terms of the vibe, say maybe Merry-Go Island or a lot of coins building, like I said before, they just don't feel like they go any, and tracks like those also don't really feel like they go anywhere musically, and as such those don't really stick with you either. Now we're going to be using an example of a song that I would like to use as an example of having multiple pieces being done well, and that is Twistee Island, a track that I wish to play for you right now. Start off with a clapping. You can hear the instrumentation in the background. You hear a change in instrumentation used here. Now it goes down to a softer version. You still hear the drums in the background. Now a change. Another change. Oops again. You hear something added to the instrumentation. And then you hear the loop. Twistee's island music is especially fitting since it's the dancing island. Segments of the track stand out in your mind, and there are different segments that sound distinct and still fitting for the track. It feels like the tracks have sections that add to the track instead of going through the motions like some of the other tracks do. Things like Desolate Island, Merry-Go Island, and Lot of Coins in the Lot of Coins building just feel like more so like they're just going through the motions more than anything. This song really seems like it takes advantage of the fact that it's a dancing island and really goes into that with the energy, and it has changing elements, it has instrumentation that it uses, a lot of different types of instrumentation, it's more experimental with that. And this, actually, fun fact, was the first little snippet of gameplay that we saw for Brothership was on Twistee Island. So it was the first little bit of music that we got. And I think whoever was behind that decision really made a good choice, because not only is it an early island, it's an early island where I feel like, in terms of the islands, I feel like this is the best one musically. So I do think that that was a good decision. Another track that I feel like does well with this whole thing is the Phase 3 of Recluse's theme. Specifically Phase 3 because the earlier phases feel like more of a build-up to the final phase. It's honestly a little bit weird, because normally when you have a music that has multiple phases or another phase, even in like a Mario game, we could even take like the Mario Party bosses for example, like Mario Party 9, Mario Party 10, when they get angry, it feels like a sped up version of their theme. With Recluse on the other hand, it feels like this is the theme playing on normal speed, and Phase 1 and Phase 2 are Phase 3 but on 0.5 speed and 0.75 speed respectively, without the dubstep in Phase 3, which I do feel is very weird and something that I don't really like about those two phases. But in terms of Phase 3, I do think it is a good example of music that feels like it has multiple moving pieces. And I feel like this is an example as a good track in terms of sounding distinct, having multiple moving pieces similar to, say, Twistee Island. Now that I've played 3 tracks for you before, which were snow tracks, there are now 3 other tracks that I'm gonna play, this time for Bowser's theme. So we're gonna take 3 Bowser's Castle themes. The first one from Super Mario Sluggers, the second one from Brothership, and the third one from Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. And what we're going to do is we're going to see the first one that has a lot more moving pieces and is pretty interesting with the instrumentation, and the third theme I feel like does a better job of updating the theme and giving it a more interesting direction. So now that we've got that established, I'm going to play these 3 themes for you. For this section though, where I chose to play 3 themes for you, we're going to do something a little bit different. We're going to start with the Brothership theme this time, and we're going to start in a decent bit into the track, because there's a specific part of the track that I want to talk about. So I'm going to play this for you, and then we're going to talk about it. Now this track is a remake of the SMB3 Bowser Castle theme, and what I just played for you is the main difference. There are 2 other things different, which the intro of the theme. There is an intro to this one that wasn't in the original SMB3 version. And another thing that's different is how this section they added in more strings where there originally was 9. So let me just play this section for you here. Now, just this section here. That part was me looking at the build-up right before the track. Then we get to the track, and the first part that I played for you of this Bowser's Castle, it had build-up. It felt like it was building towards something, and then the theme quieted down. And the quiet part of this track sounds nice, but it's weird after that came after a part that felt like it was clearly building towards something only to quiet down, and then it just loops back to the regular song after that section. And I feel like this is a good example of a track not really going anywhere musically, because the Bowser's Castle on Way Way Island feels like it fizzles out more than anything else. I still kind of like the instrumentation, but generally speaking, it just feels like it fizzles out, because it just heavily quiets down after something that felt like it was building towards something, and then it just loops, and then there's nothing after it. For the most part, besides the differences that I mentioned, this Bowser's Castle is very, very similar to the original version on SMB3. Pretty old Bowser's Castle remake, which honestly was very repetitive and could have desperately used and appreciated more of a remix or a modern remix of the track. Now there are two tracks I'm going to be playing. One from Mario Sluggers, a baseball game by the way. You're gonna see this track, or you're gonna hear this track, this first one, go so insanely hard for a baseball game, and then the second one that feels like it has a more interesting modern instrumentation. That it feels like it takes the direction of another old theme that definitely appreciated an instrumentation that actually went somewhere interesting that worked really well with the game, being Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. So I'm going to play SNES BC3 from Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, and I'm going to be playing Mario Sluggers Bowser's Castle theme. And this one is going to demonstrate the more interesting instrumentation of an updated theme, and more flexibility in instrumentation, more flexibility allowed in the soundtrack. So I'm going to start with Sluggers first, and then we're going to go to 8 Deluxe, and then we're going to talk about 8 Deluxe a little bit more in detail once we're done with that. So for now, I'm just going to play Super Sluggers for you first, and then 8 Deluxe SNES BC3. So let's get to it. So that was the Mario Slugger theme. Yes, from a Mario's baseball game. That one goes so incredibly hard. And I think it does a great job of updating a track and using more interesting instrumentation and going generally in more interesting directions. Now another one is going to be taking an old track and it's going to take it in a different direction, have some musical instrumentation that works really well with the game that it's part of. So let's go to the one in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe SNES BC3. This track does a great job of taking advantage of the fact that Bowser has had some more rock theme used in it, and it takes that rock, adds it to an old track. This is the direction that we're going. Make it sound super fast-paced to work really well with the fact that it's racing. Example of an update that works really well with the game, both of which update older tracks and do a lot with such updates. So it was a little disappointing to see Bowser's Castle in this game not try to do something quite as interesting. Now, two tracks that I really like in Brothership is the boss battle theme in this game and the theme whenever you win a battle or level up. Both of these tracks honestly are very good, and they're both battle themes. And to explain why I think battle themes might have some of the better tracks in this game in general, we can look at the interview, and I think we're going to get a good idea of where things were going in the musical direction and production side of things, where they wanted to go, which way they ended up going, and we'll be able to look at that and see why some of these boss themes are better, or some of the better tracks in the game. And the reason why, and this is something that I'm going to reference when looking down, and a theory that I have that's also supported by the interview is the fact that some of these tracks are better when they're built around fitting the animations of the characters, the Mario Brothers, and this is like a better vision behind the directions of the songs, and it's used sparingly as well, as there are only a few battle themes, being the enemy theme, the mid-boss theme, the boss theme, the final boss, and the Battle 1 theme. And it being used sparingly also does a great job for these themes to stand out even more. Now, I'm going to scroll down and read a section of the interview for you, and we will also look at another game's musical direction as well for comparison, and I want to talk about the musical direction of another game in the series as well, and why I think the direction or the vision behind this game worked to benefit this entire game, and why the vision behind the battle themes made these themes stick out a lot more than maybe some other tracks in the game. Some battle themes sticking out more than some other tracks, many other tracks in this game. So we're going to be looking at a section of the interview called Ask the Developer Volume 15, and it's Mario and Luigi Brothership Part 4. And we're going to be looking at a section where Otani and Osashi give us some insight on the direction behind the music. Otani says, a lot of background music in the series so far has used piano tunes, but we wanted something new this time. So we asked somebody else in the music production to use the wind instruments and add more emotion, and we left the rest to him. Osashi says, we really struggled to create the music. We have meetings with Sakamoto-san once a week, where we'd both be like, what does Mario and Luigi like even mean? In the end, we picked out instruments that sounded like Mario and Luigi and reduced the number of them to hone in on that Mario and Luigi-like feeling. Things like tropical steel pans, upbeat brass bands, accordions. And Otani says, once we narrowed down the selection of instruments, it started to match the series' atmosphere. Although Mario and Luigi has no clear definition, one key point I kept in mind was whether it matched Mario and Luigi's in-game movements. And I'm gonna stop there. But this will be in the description below for your reading convenience, and it will also be shown, or is already being shown in the editing on the screen, so you can see what I'm talking about and what I'm referencing. Now, vision in another Mario and Luigi game that I wanted to talk about as well is the Mario and Luigi game, in my opinion, which I think has the best soundtrack of the series, that being Dream Team. And there are two music tracks that I'm going to play for you, or a little bit for you, and then we're going to talk about it. And what I think, and what I see of what the musical direction was, and how I feel like this is a very strong vision utilized throughout the entire game, and the strength of this direction being displayed throughout the entire game and throughout the entire game's soundtrack. The two tracks that I'm going to play for you is the Wakeport theme and the Dreamy Wakeport theme. So I'm going to play the Wakeport theme first, then play the Dreamy Wakeport one, and a bit of both, and then we'll talk about it. So first up is Wakeport. That's the Wakeport theme. Now I'm going to play through the Dreamy Wakeport theme. Now, Wakeport and Dreamy Wakeport is an example behind the vision of the music where I feel like it enhances the music overall, and I feel like this is a vision that, while I respect both visions, I do kind of feel like this one strengthens the music of the game. I like this one more, this vision more at the end of the day. Dreamy versions of the original soundtracks are slower and use different instrumentation, and it works pretty well considering it's the dreamy version, and the music will also feel muffled to also work well with the fact that it's a dreamy version. Now, you could say that earlier I talked about how I thought Rayquaza's Phase 1 and 2 themes are themes that I didn't really like that much, but you like the slower themes here. Well, the reason why I like the slower themes here instead of other Rayquaza themes is that, one, it works better with the vision of the game, and two, they are two different area themes instead of 3 final boss themes, and this direction fits a lot better under the direction of real world versus dream world location. To conclude part 3 of this video, while I respect the direction and the vision behind this game, I do feel like condensing the flexibility in instrumentation, instruments that you allow yourself to use, ended up hurting the soundtrack more overall. Because some other Mario tracks that also feel like they have less inspiration or interesting inspiration behind them, feel like they are more flexible with instruments that are used throughout the entire soundtrack of the game to stand out more. So to help out that soundtrack more. Something that this game doesn't do as much because they limited the amount of instruments that they feel like they could use. I respect the idea, but I feel like this might be why the soundtrack overall is weaker and it stands out less. Because the music in this game, not only is there a less interesting inspiration behind some of these in comparison to something like Shiveria, like I played earlier, that takes advantage of using Nordic music or Nordic and Celtic sounding music, because the area is based off of areas in Russia, in Siberia, in Scandinavia. Not every Mario track has that interesting of a musical inspiration, but they at least have a lot more flexibility in the instruments that they do use to make up for it. So Brothership feels like it's lacking unique inspiration behind some of these tracks, behind a lot of these tracks, and it feels like it's missing that flexibility in instrumentation as well, leading to why I believe the soundtrack might be noticeably weaker in this game compared to many other Mario games, and why the soundtrack in this game stands out less. Now it's time for part 4 of the video, where I talk about how Luigi, puzzles, dungeons, and side quests are handled and my grievances with them. Like I said in the earlier portion of the video, part 1, where I was talking about the smaller grievances, when Luigi is moving on his own, and when he's just walking, I think it's fine, but in gameplay or puzzle segments is where I would say this is a negative element. as these segments are more engaging and have more interactivity when you control both brothers. For example of interactivity being an important element of working with both brothers in many games in the series is installments like Partners in Time, for example. Mario and Luigi would split up to solve segments either with themselves or with the babies, and this type of gameplay was streamlined and perfected in like Bowser's Inside Story and Dream Team. For example, when you're in Bowser's Inside Story at the beach area, for example, Bowser would drink water from the fountain, and then when he drinks water, Mario and Luigi can swim in his stomach, and then platforms that may be blocking the path will float up, and then when he stops drinking the water, these platforms will go back down. So you need to switch between Bowser drinking the water and not drinking the water. And in Dream Team, for example, Starlo would touch Luigi in different parts while he's asleep to activate certain abilities in the dream world. For example, sometimes Starlo would need to pull Luigi's mustache in order to activate something in the dream world. So there's interactivity between what you do with Starlo and Luigi and how it affects the dream world. There's interactivity in when you choose to make Bowser drink water versus when Bowser doesn't drink water, and there are many examples of this throughout the entire series, not just these games. And there are many examples in other examples in these games, but these are just a few examples. And it does a good job of adding in more interactivity and more engagement to solve the puzzle segments present in those games. To compare and contrast, I'm first going to be explaining how mini-games work in Brothership, and like these little mini-games and these little puzzles where Luigi moves on his own. I'm going to give a few examples of how these puzzles work and the type of puzzles that they are. And then I'm going to be talking about some of the puzzles or areas of interactivity in Bowser's Inside Story, for example. And so there are many games that you play inside Bowser's stomach, and these are the two things that I'm going to use to compare and contrast to convey what I'm talking about how there was more interactivity and more engaging mini-games and engaging elements of these mini-games, and more interactivity is a large part of that. Many mini-games that you would do with Luigi is mini-games where there are numbered platforms, well, squares, where Mario would have the red number 1, Luigi have like green number 2, and Mario would have the odd numbers, for example, 1, 3, 5, 7, etc. So, and how it would work is that you go with Mario to the red 1, and then Luigi goes to the green 2, and then you have to get to the 3 before Luigi gets to the 4, and then it continues from there. And that's the general process of how that minigame would work. And there's another minigame that you would do where Mario would step on a red platform, the squared platform, and then a green one will pop up, and then Luigi would automatically jump over to that platform, and then Mario would have to jump to the red platform that pops up next after Luigi lands where he is before the red one that you're currently under disappears. And these would be some type of mini games or set pieces that you would find in Mario and Luigi Brothership, and these have less interactivity, and they're also a lot simpler and not nearly as interesting. Obviously, I don't need to be the hardest thing in the world. It's the Mario and Luigi game after all, but I would appreciate a little bit more of interactivity, especially since that's so important to the franchise. What could have added a little bit more to these mini games at the very least with the numbered squares is if they were hard to get to. But that's not really something that I can say about these either, as it's pretty easy for Mario to get to the first square that he needs to get to, and all the other odd numbered squares that he would need to get to. So it doesn't really have that going for it either. So there isn't really much to the mini games that you will be doing. By contrast, some of the mini games that Bowser's Inside Story would be a little bit more engaging, as you're working with both brothers, and the puzzles, the objective is still simple, but the puzzle itself, or what you have to do, is more interesting. For example, there will be multiple times where Bowser's body shuts down and Mario and Luigi have to work together to revive it from the inside. And there will be other mini games as well, because, for example, there's a carrot mini game in Mario and Luigi Bowser's Inside Story where Bowser eats the carrot and Mario and Luigi have to destroy them from the inside. And if we're going back to some things where Bowser's inside is like shut down and you have to revive it. There will be the boat minigame, for example, where you just have to shoot and destroy red and green orbs without getting hit 3 times. And there will be another minigame where you would actually, in order to revive Bowser, you would have to hammer all the red orbs with Mario and hammer all the green orbs with Luigi. And the weird thing is that this is something that you also do in this game with the hammering, the one specifically, which is why I brought up that example. An example in Floral Island, in order to open up many of the flower paths in this game, you have to hammer the red orbs as Mario and the green orbs as Luigi. And this is something where you do actually have to control both brothers. So it's a bit weird that the interactivity is lost in most other things. And it is something that I do feel like takes away from the whole essence of Mario and Luigi, as the interactivity is very important to the franchise. And I feel like it would be even more important in this game, considering this game is all about the connections between people and the connections between the brothers, which makes it even more of a problem, I would say, because the theme of this entire game is the connections between people and also exploring the connections between the brothers Mario and Luigi, and this is the one game where it doesn't really have a lot of interactive minigames. There will be 2 more sections in this video where I talk more about the interactivity element, but for now I'm going to leave that discussion there about interactivity, but I will bring up the point of interactivity like 2 more times throughout the video in different sections of the video. Up next, it's time to talk about dungeons and islands, both of which I feel like are pretty simple design-wise. And once again, I don't necessarily need the dungeons to be difficult, because I'm not going into a Mario game expecting difficulty, but I feel like the dungeons could have done a better job of exploring the exploration angle, exploring more interesting locations, and having the things that you do be more interesting. Because dungeons, unlike most islands in the game, aren't really more engaging in terms of what you do. It's more so per se of, it just has more steps. And most islands don't really have a lot of steps in them. It's just you go there, you do your objective, and then you leave. There are a few islands that are more expanded, which I will get to in a second, but before I get to dungeons and talking about some of the more expansive islands, because there is a dungeon that I want to mention later in the section that is also lacking the interactivity that I would like to see in a game like this, a Mario and Luigi game, and we're going to use this dungeon as an example to not only talk about how it could have been more interactive, but talk about how dungeon design could have been more interesting. We're also going to talk about the expansive island, some of the more expansive islands later, because I want to talk about how most islands in the game, and how islands in the game are in general are typically handled, and how I would have liked to see them handled instead, as I feel like if we handle it a different way, these islands could be better as a result of this. To talk about how I feel islands could have been handled instead, I have 2 different suggestions. The first suggestion is having bigger islands but fewer of them, and the second suggestion, and the one that I'd probably go with instead, is there being multiple parts of the same island broken into multiple sections. And just say, for example, there are 3 islands that make up one island when you put them together to get the whole island. This could be an interesting way of going about it, as you still find a large amount of islands, but this could be more interesting as a storytelling tool, as you have multiple different types of people living on the same island. It's just different sections of that same island. For example, when you build it on Rainforest Island and make it on Twistee Island, imagine if when you get both of these islands, like both of these islands are connected in some way. So these 2 areas make up the same island. Now you could say that many puzzles that you have to do in the game that result around Luigi moving on his own is more babyfied elements. You could say that this is a lot more babyfied, and this is something that I can't really say about previous Mario and Luigi games. I don't really feel like there were any babyfied elements in those, but like let's say one of the mini games that I mentioned earlier is just like, oh yeah, just have Mario step on this number 1, and then Luigi goes and step on number 2, and then you just do a puzzle that revolves around counting up. And once again, it's not difficult for you to get to any of these numbers, and then there's puzzles like that just revolve around counting. And that's really simple, even for like Mario and Luigi standard. And I do feel like some of the more expansive islands also have the problem of having some babyfied elements. There are 4 expansive islands that come to mind, 2 of which I would like to save for a later section of the video. Not only because I feel like it's more relevant there, but there are 2 islands that I feel like I have less grievances with. I still have problems with them, but I feel like they're much better expansive islands, and they're more important for a later section of the video. And there are going to be 2 other ones that I wish to talk about, those being a lot of coins and bulbfish. So I'm going to be focusing on these 2 islands in my grievances with both. The other 2 expansive islands I'm thinking about are heavily related to Bowser and Bowser Jr., and they're going to be very important to talk about in a later section of the video. So for now, we're just focusing on a lot of coins and bulbfish. And I'm going to start off talking about a lot of coins. The reason why I'm going to talk about a lot of coins first is that I don't think it's nearly as bad in this whole like babyfied thing, but it is an example of one of the more expansive islands, because what you have to do is first you have to find a way to a top floor by solving some puzzles that you get from one of the enemies. So basically what you would do is that there would just be pictures of how many of this object and maybe how many of this object, and then once you get all those details, you hit the numbers in a room, and once you get that code cleared, then you can access another floor of the room. The problem is, not only are these puzzles, again, incredibly simple, but it's just like, oh, how many of this object are there? Or this object plus the amount of this object, or this object minus the amount of this object, and in addition and subtraction, basically. And that's incredibly basic, even for Mario and Luigi standard. But once again, it's not even hard to find the objects that you're looking for. Some of the objects are in the room you're already in, like the cabinets or some pencils or other things that you may need to see, like plants, for example. It's just like, oh, you just walk back past that bridge that you got to, and then you just walk back downstairs, and then you're just like, oh, how many plants are on these tables? Again, it's not even hard to get to these objects, which also makes it really simple and not really that engaging. But the worst of the babyfied elements is, again, when you're just doing some things that are just like simple addition and subtraction. There's one idle kid in a puzzle later in order to open the prison that Peach and or Luigi and other people are locked into, and it's just, oh yeah, you see the numbers on these poles? It's just like, what's this number plus this number minus this number plus this number? The fact that a lot of puzzles and a lot of coins revolve around basic addition and subtraction, I'm just like, yeah, this is incredibly babyfied in terms of a puzzle. What's even worse than this, though, is Bulbfish Island, my pick for the worst island in the game, 100%. At least with a lot of Coins Island, I can say that, yeah, some of these are incredibly simple, even for Mario and Luigi standards, with like basic addition and subtraction, but at least you're just getting codes just like to unlock like another floor, to unlock this cage, and I guess that's decently interesting, I suppose, at the end of the day, in conception. But in Bulbfish Island, it's just, once you get there, it's solving a mystery of, oh yeah, who stole these fish eggs or whatever, and it's blatantly obvious that it's like the mayor's son, even to incredibly like young children, I imagine. Like, it's so incredibly obvious that it's him. So the mystery element that could have been interesting is just non-existent. And once again, in terms of exploring the area, there's not really much to it neither. And once you solve this thing and it's exposed that it's him, his punishment for stealing these fish eggs and framing Bernadette and Shillian, because this is the first island where they appear and he frames them to cover himself. So his punishment is, oh yeah, your punishment for stealing from people and framing people is getting the job of being the mayor that you always wanted, as his father steps down because the son is upset with his father because the father is so lazy. So he steals from people, not just any people. The son steals from his own people, the ones on his island. And he frames two people. The two people he frames being Bernadette and Shillian. And afterwards, his punishment is you can get the job that you always wanted. Also, there's no sense of any understanding between him and the father, because the father, instead of taking any level of accountability, starts fighting the son because the son isn't getting his snack. So the son calls him out on his laziness and tells him to get his own snack, and they can fight. After they're done fighting, the father steps down, and the son is going to be the new mayor, and I'm just sitting here thinking to myself,
So the father's going to continue to be lazy, and the son is rewarded for his bad actions. That's how the island ends. Really, that's how it ends. The ending of this island solves absolutely nothing, and that's why I called it baby-fied storytelling. Because at the end of the day, nothing changes. This is just bad storytelling, and I'm not going to sit here and go on the spiel of, oh, it's such a bad lesson to teach to your young audience. Because realistically, no child is going to go out there and steal from people and frame people just because they played Mario and Luigi Brothership, if I'm being real. Sometimes people go on this whole spiel about how it's dangerous, how it teaches this to children or young impressionable audiences, and while I do agree sometimes, and we do agree on this sometimes, I feel like there's been times where you've seen someone say something like this and you think to yourself, well, okay, I agree that this is bad writing, but realistically a kid is never going to go out there and do this X thing, specifically because they consumed this Y piece of media. Of course, this is the case sometimes. It can be dangerous, but other times you just sit there and think to yourself, you're overblowing this a bit. I wouldn't be surprised if someone can relate to being in this spot after hearing this argument, and if I was to go on that spiel of, oh, it teaches people to steal and frame people, it'd be reasonable for you to just think to yourself or go to yourself, okay, but realistically, no kid's gonna go out there and do that. So what I would say, however, is I would still just call it bad writing at the end of the day. Because again, nothing changes and nobody comes to any level of understanding at all. The dad is still gonna continue to be lazy, and the son got rewarded for stealing from people. So I'm very comfortable calling this the worst island in the game.
Now, there is a specific dungeon that I mentioned earlier that I wanted to use an example of lack of interactivity and a bit of a baby-fied element. And that's the one dungeon where Luigi will get inside a barrel and just like automatically move in front of a light and automatically move like up to a platform so you can jump on him and get up on this platform or whatever, instead of you controlling it yourself. And an example of what they could have done instead to make this more interesting in terms of dungeon design is using the whole light theme or lack of light theme in this area to its benefit. Maybe something like Donkey Kong Country 1 has a level called Basement Blackout, where it just uses the light in a more interesting way, as well as you would be able to guess from the title, it blacks out. The area blacks out, which would make platforming more tricky as you would have to work around that gimmick. There's another level in Donkey Kong Country 3 that also takes advantage of lights going on and off for the level design, as there will be many switches in this level that you have to get to and turn them on and off. You have to memorize platforms so you just don't fall off. And this section area in Donkey Kong Country 3 is called Loopy Lights. As a matter of fact, another reason why I feel like this is a great example to bring up is because this is a gimmick demonstrated in Mario and Luigi Brothership. In Desolate Island, where you find one of the idol kids after you're playing the hide-and-seek with them, you find the blue one after clearing the section Luke. There would be one area in Desolate Island where the light dims in the area, and the lights don't really work well. So you would have to get to a section where you can just hit a switch and the light in the areas would turn back on. So having a dungeon use that could have been more interesting, especially because this dungeon is already a dark dungeon, and you have to avoid guards with flashlights and stuff. So I feel like something like this could have been done with the whole theme of the lights going bright and dim, because this is something that's already been introduced in the game, and a dungeon design like that could have been more interesting and more engaging. To be fair though, trying to get out of sight, make sure you're out of sight from some of these guards pointing spotlights, could work and could be more fun if I was simply able to control Luigi being in the barrel myself, as that would just make this more interesting, as once again the interactivity element would just add a lot of engagement, and it's just important to the series. So I would have appreciated that at the very least. Up next, I would like to talk about the side quest, and this is an element of Brothership that I think is just straight up awful, honestly. Not only are most of them, they feel very fetch questy, most of them are not good thematically, as most of them don't add to the theme of connections, because most of them don't have two people or multiple people from different islands bonding. And they also have a whole FOMO thing going on with these side quests as well, which is really annoying and stupid. I will get to the FOMO stuff later, but first I want to talk about how a lot of these are not very good thematically. I'm going to use one example of there being a rare case where there are two people from different islands in a side quest, and then we'll go from there. A heat-free side quest titled Separated is one of the rare instances of a side quest where the focus is on the relationship of two people, but things like this do not happen enough. The game fails to have side quests like this a lot, but there is an attempt of humor in the side quest that we can touch on and compare to another side quest, which also fails to stick the landing, but does a better job than this attempt. Because I did say I was going to talk about other attempts at humor here and there whenever it's relevant. So basically this side quest is about two people, and a dancer on Twistee Island and a ice girl on Heat Freeze. And the ice girl liked the guy on Twistee Island, so we have to send the message to him. And once we send the message from him, the guy from Twistee Island comes over to Heat Freeze to live out his life with this girl. And his whole thing is, oh, I'm just gonna dance and I'm not gonna work. And the girl's just like, oh yeah, I'll work for both of us. And it maybe if we came back to see how this couple was doing, to see how she gets tired of him by being lazy and not willing to get a job, because his whole thing is just like, oh, I'm just gonna dance and that's it. And then, but they instantly make up though because she's just so attracted to him or something. Maybe this could have been funny. And also, definitely not repeating the joke, as repetition would surely kill this. Repetition is something done with jokes, quote-unquote, in this game a lot, so we definitely don't want that. But as it stands, it just lampshades the fact that he just wants to dance and will not work, and how the ice girl will work for both of them. And then that's where this ends. So I feel like it just fails to be funny. Another relationship destined to fail being done better in this department is a Mariko side quest titled A Vision in Pink, where one of the islanders has a crush on Berto, and they just do basically a whole theatric speed run of the relationship. This one was almost funny, but I feel like it missed the mark due to not playing into it enough. It really getting extra with the animations I feel like could have made this land. So that's a comparison between two side quests that failed to be funny, but one does a slightly better job and is closer to being funny. But another problem with a side quest like the one that I just mentioned up above, the Heat Freeze side quest called Separated, the biggest problem with a side quest like this is like one of the only times, if not the only time, where it focuses on two different people who from different islands and the connection between these people. Now, going into the whole FOMO thing, side quests in this game, almost all of them expire. There are very few who don't, a very small selection of don't, and we'll talk about those in a minute. But most of the ones in this game do expire, and the game basically trains you to be like, oh yeah, side quests are expiring, all side quests are going to expire. They're not going to tell you which ones actually don't end up expiring until you beat the final boss, because there will be a few that don't expire until you beat the final boss, but the game does not make it clear which ones those are. But let me just give an example of how it's really stupid how a lot of these side quests are things that can expire. For example, there's a Heat Freeze side quest called The Missing Ring, where this islander loses a ring, and something like this is something that is a side quest that can expire for some reason. I have no idea why side quests like these can expire, and these are a large chunk of the side quests in this game. Why does something like that expire? It's just like, oh, if you get too far in the game, there would just be like, oh, you can't find this ring anymore. It makes no sense. There are a few side quests, a couple of them, that actually make sense to expire, as it makes sense that you wouldn't be able to have this conversation or do this thing with somebody once you reach a certain point in the story. But I don't really like this either, and I will explain why I don't like this idea either further in the story, as it's much more relevant to the next part, which is the character and story segment, as I'm going to go into detail of some of these characters, their stories, and many of which have just optional side quests. And we're going to be talking about why I don't like this whole angle that the game pushes. But as it stands, most side quests just make absolutely no sense to be FOMO, and the ones that do are something that I think just should not be side quests in the first place, and is something that should just actually be built in to be a part of the story, and it's really stupid that it's not. You may think that it's okay that it's not, because I'm just like, oh, well, maybe as long as the side quest is well fleshed out, because you're not really going to want to skip these side quests if you know that they are relevant to an important character, but we'll get to that later. But just one thing that I will say for now, though, is These side quests are not well fleshed out at all, and that is a huge issue, because if they were, then maybe this would be okay. Another reason this whole FOMO thing to the side quest is bad is because a lot of backtracking that you will likely be doing for some of these side quests, and it's really annoying if you're one of the people who's interested in 100%ing games. And even if you're not, it's still just an annoying thing to do. Keep in mind, I am not somebody who likes to 100% games. I'm typically just not a person who does this type of thing. But I still think it's just a bad design to just be like, we're gonna add a FOMO to these side quests. And again, especially when most of them are things that make absolutely no sense to be things that can expire. Examples of backtracking that you'll likely be doing is sailing back to do Gloam side quests, like Gloam Goblik, for example, is something that you get as a side quest, and when you get to it as a side quest, you're gonna want to do it because boss battles are like the most fun thing in this game. So if you're interested in doing that, you have to sail all the way back to the first sea where the lighthouse is, the first lighthouse in the game. Because when you get this side quest, you're most likely just going to be in a completely different sea. Actually, no, you will be in a completely different sea when you get this side quest. And it will take a very long time to get back to where you are. Yeah, because this is something that you definitely will be doing when you're multiple seas away, because the Gloam boss, Gloam Goblik, is something that you only unlock after Bernadette and Chilliam's wedding, an area that is very deep in the game and is multiple seas away. So when you actually unlock the area and you talk to him, you have to sail all the way back to the Great Lighthouse. There's no way to auto-travel at this point in time. You will have to just go all the way back. And yes, there's a speed-up option on the map, but it still takes forever to get from the fourth sea to the first sea. It is absolutely ridiculous how you cannot just automatically teleport to the Great Lighthouse. Yes, we will get to what you may be thinking in just a second. But first, I do want to also say, let's just say you've happened to miss a reef or something. Or there's an area that you want to explore because you think it might have a reef or a few reefs. Well, if there's like a strip that you missed and you're just like, oh, I didn't explore this strip all the way in the first sea, but I'm in the fourth sea. You have to sail all the way back to the fourth sea. The first sea. Like, it's absolutely ridiculous. And even with speed up, it still takes forever. And there is no interactivity at all. It's just, you see the little boat going on the top of the map. And there isn't even any interactivity to you being the one to move the boat yourself. It's just abysmal. And there are two things that you may be thinking after this. One, oh, well, you can unlock fast travel. Yes, you can. But you'll unlock fast travel right before Zocket, near end game, because he's the second, the major boss that you fight before the end game. Because he's like, Zocket, well, Zocket is the boss, and then after that, the whole Reclusa thing happens, and you will fight some bosses or enemies there as well. But in terms of the big bosses, Zocket is like the second to last one. You will have to go all the way through the game until you unlock the fast travel option. All the way until there. And also, Gloam bosses that you do unlock, since you can unlock some of these before the end game, and they are things that you will want to go back to the beginning of the sea, and if you don't look this information up, you would have no way of knowing that you're ever going to unlock fast travel, because of how late it happens in the game. Honestly, when I was at this point in the game, I kind of just assumed I was never going to get it. The second thing that you may be thinking is, oh, well, when you unlock an island, there are flower paths that open up. So you can go back to that island and walk on those flower paths that have opened up. So there is something to do in the meantime. Not really, because these paths don't really have anything interesting a lot of the time. It's just that maybe you'll have a block with like item in it that's not really that important, or maybe like some coins. A lot of the times there will be some plugs that you find, which will be important. But again, if you just naturally explore the game regularly, you don't even need to explore all these extra areas. You'll probably have more than enough plugs to unlock stuff that you need. So not only is it not interesting, it's also just not something that would really be necessary. It's a resource that's not exactly finite. And even if it was, it doesn't change the fact that, again, these extra areas that open up, not only is there not much to it, it doesn't change the fact that it's absolutely insane how long it takes to get between seas, and absolutely insane how deep into the game you unlock fast travel. If you're going to have bosses in like an area like the Great Lighthouse, for example, an optional boss, which yes, it's optional, but it is something that I would want to do, because the bosses are like actually probably like the best part of this game, I would say so. Of course I'm gonna want to do something like that. It would be so easy to just have the option to just automatically go back to the lighthouse. Like, I can warp to islands that I connect. Why can I not warp to previous lighthouses that I've been to? It doesn't make any sense. Another thing that you may have missed in a previous current as well is that sometimes you will come across smaller islands that you cannot connect to. They're little like challenge islands. Sometimes they have enemies, and sometimes these little challenge islands have puzzles that you can do. And once again, like the reefs, if you want to go back and explore a current to see just like, oh, maybe there's a reef or a challenge island or something back here. The challenge island is also something that you can miss, and maybe you want to explore this current to see if you can go find it. But if you're like all the way in the fourth sea and you see just like, oh, there's an area all the way in the first sea that I didn't explore, have fun going all the way back, trying to get there. Like, if you just happen to want to go here before you get to endgame, because once again, there's a very good chance that you don't know that you're going to get auto travel because of how late you unlock it in the game, and if you just didn't look it up. Which a lot of people don't really look up some stuff like this when they're trying to play a game for the first time. Another part that makes this annoying is the few bosses that are Golem bosses and the Monster Mania side quests are like, these groups of side quests are things that are not going to expire until you go do the final boss. But what makes it annoying is not that fact, but it's the fact that the whole FOMO thing is something that has been trained in you to think that it's just like, hey, these things are going to expire. Because side quests like these also glow red. They do glow red when you, a good amount of time you get deeper into the game without doing them. So you are trained to think that there's a possibility that this could expire before you get deeper into the story. So if you want to do them, you're going to be incentivized to stop once you notice it's glowing red. Also, there's a side quest from All Sand, which is called Letter from a Drifting Island. And if you want to do this side quest, you're going to have to go talk to this brother. And then he says this other brother is somewhere out in the sea that you have not been to. You definitely haven't been to at that point in the game, because it's an area that you wouldn't have been able to even access until after you talk to this guy. And then if you want to do this before the end game, and because you're just like, oh, I don't know that I'm going to unlock fast travel, you're gonna have to sail all the way back there to that sea in order to find that brother. I did touch up on the interactivity or lack thereof when traveling to each island, as you just see a map with the boat on the top instead of you actually controlling the boat to explore these islands instead, which could have been more interesting. Wind Waker has ship exploration like this that's more entertaining due to the interactivity. Origami King, Paper Mario Origami King also has a section like this in like the Purple Streamer chapter as well, where you just go in a ship and you can control it yourself to explore islands. It's just more enjoyable to have that level of interactivity. It's another example of Brothership not having that level of interactivity. Brothership does allow you to explore these islands in the meantime, like other islands in the meantime, like I've mentioned before. But like I've mentioned before, exploration in these areas isn't really that interesting, because again, there's not really much to explore, as I've gone over earlier. Even on speed up, it's a pain to get the side quests that are several seas away, as I've already talked about as well, and I've already given examples for as well, like the All Sand Island side quest, Letter from a Drifting Island, and the Golem boss side quest as well. Another detail that I would like to mention is that the ship slows down once you get near an island to explore, a combat island or an island that has a challenge on it, like a puzzle, or a landmark like a reef, which while it can be helpful while exploring as you have time to get back to the island, you have to wait for the island to get in cannon range, as you can not identify the island from the map and just automatically teleport from the island to the cannon once in cannon range, which is a little weird. Man, it would just be appreciated if once a ship got close to an unidentified island, I wouldn't just have to leave that island, come back to the ship, even though it's not that hard to do, because you do have a pipe that you get, thankfully. Get off that island, go back to the ship, then just walk up to the cannon. but it would be convenient and probably pretty easy to just program it so you could just click that island from the map, and then you could just cannon from there. It is a small thing, but it's a thing that I'm just like, I would have appreciated. Something else that would have also been appreciated is the option to choose between interactivity with the boat when I just want to find something on the sea, either an island to explore, a challenge island that has a combat or a puzzle, or stone carving like a reef, and to also have the option to let the ship follow the course if I want to explore something in the meantime. Now it's time to get into part 5, which is about characters, story, and expanding upon why I hate how side quests are handled. Because a lot of characters that I'm going to be talking about have a side quest dedicated to them, so this is the perfect time to expand on that. But first, let me talk about some of the characters. And I'm going to start off with some of the returning characters. Starting off with returning characters, Peach is okay in this game. She's not much of a damsel in this game, and she actually has the opportunity to do stuff. She does voluntarily get kidnapped, and Starlo's face is kind of funny after she mentions that. It's not like laugh out loud funny, but it's kind of charming. If you choose her to be kidnapped, which I did personally, and I feel like a lot of people did, because I mean, even if you are curious about how Luigi not being there would go, you wouldn't want to have Mario and Luigi's experience points split, as Peach can't fight in this game, which I think is a missed opportunity for sure. Huge missed opportunity. Imagine if there were some islands where the boat couldn't get anywhere near the island, or there were some caves where you would need to play as Peach and reconnect these islands, as she can reach these islands with Dory, because Peach and the idle kids do go off with Dory later in the game. And if it worked like this, then you would feel like Peach is actually doing something, because there are islands that you genuinely can't get to without Peach. Because as it stands, while they try to involve Peach more in the story, she doesn't really do much. If you do go with her and you allow her to voluntarily be kidnapped on Lana Coin's island, once you rescue her though, it was a mission where it's just like she gets thrown in jail, gets kidnapped to try to gather intel on Galone, but you don't really learn anything new. As for when Peach and the idle kids go on Slippenglide and you need to rescue some of the idle kids that are stuck on Slippenglide, you also don't learn anything new. So as it stands, Peach doesn't really do anything in this game. Also, the idea of splitting up Mario and Luigi could be interesting, having them fight some bosses by themselves and the other brother who you are currently separated from gives you maybe bond attacks or something. Which could function like how in Dream Team, Dream Luigi's spirit goes inside Mario, boosting his HP, attacks, and gives him some Dream Bro attacks that can only be used in the Dream World. It would also be good to show how strong the brothers' bond is, as it's almost like they're still with you, and it could be an interesting switch up to the gameplay. Because the bonds between people and the bonds between brothers is something that's supposed to be important in this game. It's like the main theme of the game, and this could be an interesting way of taking that and putting it in some of the gameplay, because as it stands, I do think this game does like a poor job with the connection between the brothers, but we will get to that in a later section. Up next, I'm going to talk about Starlo. Starlo does come back in this game, and I like Starlo. I'm glad to see her again. She's happy to see Mario and Luigi again, and while she does throw a jab at Luigi, it's clearly playful and it doesn't go too far. There's a side quest with her, something you can miss, where Starlo, aka Chippy, checks in on Bowser, and that's a cute callback. Her character was done well, and while I'm not big on Snoutlet as he's either just okay or a minor annoyance, either with the unfunny gimmick of his jokes, quote-unquote, or him and Luigi just not letting you explore, I didn't want her to be the main partner in this game anyway, as I think it's cool to give the role to other characters. On the topic of partner characters in Mario and Luigi for a quick second, outside of Starlo, I'm not really a huge fan of any of these guys. So while I would say Snoutlet is probably the weakest one, it's not by much, and that's not much of an insult considering Starlo is really the only one that did anything, being our main form of communication with Bowser and Bowser's Inside Story. And in Dream Team, she pulls body parts of Luigi or touches Luigi while he's asleep to use his powers in the Dream World. And Starlo is really the only partner character in the Mario and Luigi franchise that I feel like has a charming personality. Snoutlet and Stuffwell don't really have much personality, and Dreambert has a little bit with his whole noble and strong-willed nature, but it doesn't really endear you to him. You don't like him per se, but you don't really dislike him either. At least that's how I feel. Case in point, besides Starlo, partners were never really that great in Mario and Luigi, but I'm not really that, upset about it, because partner characters were always something that was always a lot more important in the Paper Mario games. Something else that I want to mention, which is a positive I didn't really mention, and I didn't really mention it because, well, it's something that I would kind of expect, but I guess if I want to be nice to this game and just every other game and just give a little small positive, I would mention that Snoutlet and all of the partners in Mario and Luigi as a whole, none of them are really annoying about having to check a guide or a tutorial. Because for example, Snoutlet does have Snoutlet schooling, but I think he brings it up once early on in the game, he brings it up again in passing briefly, but generally speaking, it's not something that I remember continuously popping up, where it's just hey, make sure you do Snoutlet schooling, check this out, Snoutlet schooling, or whatever. I don't remember the game being that annoying about it, and I don't really feel like any of the Mario and Luigi games are that annoying about that in general, so that's a plus that I felt like just touching upon real quick, while on the topic of Starlo and partner characters. Up next for returning characters, we have Bowser. Bowser coming back around the penultimate of this game was nice, as the game really needed something to happen around this time period where he showed up. His inclusion wasn't really that important this time around. It was more about giving Bowser Jr. something in this game, which I like, even if I did have an issue with it, which I will get to later. On and Off Island is probably my pick in the best island of the game, being decently expansive. And this is around the time period where I'm going to start mentioning islands that are related to Bowser and or Bowser Jr. One of which I will mention right here, which is, again, is Off and On Island. And like I said, it's probably my pick for the best island in the game. And trying to keep yourself disguised on an island where Bowser, his son, and his troops convince the islanders that you're wanted criminals. The disguises that Mario and Luigi wear look pretty stupid, and there's definitely some humor in how effective it is. And you're introduced to Buddy on this island as well, a pretty important character to this game. Wayway Island, the other Bowser-related island, is also decently interesting in how you get there, having to choose to explore different areas, and you have to choose the correct way in order to advance, because there are a bunch of smaller islands, and you take a pipe, and then you have to choose the correct pipe in order to get to the next island, and then get to the next until you get to the castle. And you just have to choose the correct way in order to advance. These islands could have had more meat on the bone, though. Eventually, you get to Bowser's Castle, which is a decently fun area to progress. And while I do feel like there could have been some more engaging set pieces to progress through, there was some stuff here, there are heaters that you have to put under hot air balloons in order to raise up to different floors, which is kind of neat. Again, it could have had some more meat in the bone, but generally speaking, it's a decently fun area to progress for sure. And some of Bowser's minions have fun attacks as well, like the Kameks, Koopas, and my personal favorite, the Shy Guys, as I love how you play a little Mario Party minigame with those guys. Bowser isn't nearly as fun or important in this game as he is in other Mario RPGs, but again, the focus is more on Bowser Jr. Now it's time to talk about new characters, and the first one I do want to talk about is Connie, and I don't really have much to say on Connie, to be honest. She's the wildness that helps you restore great lighthouses, and while she has doubts in her abilities, especially compared to her mentor Cosette, it's not something that is explored, as she's able to fix every great lighthouse without any issues. As for her relationship with her mentor, you do get a good amount of flashbacks to see them, but the relationship isn't fleshed out, despite having more time than other relationships that are supposed to be very important to this game. Up next, I want to talk about Technicky, and Technicky came off as a little bit annoying at first, honestly, as her dialogue had her saying obvious stuff and using buzzwords in every sentence to make her sound smarter. Don't know if this is another poor attempt at humor, and that was supposed to be her quote-unquote gimmick, but I don't really find it funny, personally. She often came off as a little bit annoying when trying to sound smarter. No, only a little bit, though. This was not a huge deal, and this is not something that was, overemphasized. Because Technicky earlier on, especially in her first encounter, it would just be her using words that sound smart in every sentence. And it just seems comes off like she's trying to sound smarter than she actually is. And I'm just can you just speak like a normal person, please? Because sometimes characters are written like this, where it's just if they're written to be a character with a certain thing about them, something like video games, for example, they'll just reference video games a lot in their dialogue, and I'm just you can write a character like this and have them written like a normal person. Obviously, this isn't always bad, and there are different levels to how bad this is, And characters like this often do have a lot of moments where they just are fleshed out, they're just allowed to be treated and presented as normal people. But dialogue like this sometimes does get a little annoying when they're focusing too much on, oh, this is their quirk, this is their thing, in order to convey to you that they're X character. We're going to overemphasize this in their dialogue, and that kind of thing is just kind of annoying. This thing for Technicky, though, I feel like was toned down around the time where some backstory was hinted for her. I feel like it was toned down around that time, and after that time she was just able to speak like a normal person after some backstory was hinted towards her. Some backstory that had the potential to be interesting. Unfortunately, Technicky's story only has one cutscene being dedicated to it. A side quest that is something that is skippable. And somebody who's important to her story, Daphne, is not a character that you see at all besides that one cutscene and once on Jellyfish Island before you get the option to pick either her or Technicky. I would have preferred, and I think it would have just been better to have a Daphne here more if she was going to be so important to Technicky's storyline. I'd prefer Technicky has a more fleshed out arc and Daphne is a more important character that shows up more. Daphne does show a bit of charming personality when we go see her on Jellyfish Island and having a crush on Luigi and all, but I do wish we saw more of her prior to Technicky to strengthen that storyline. Quick editor's note, to go into detail about the option to pick between Technicky and Daphne, they both have two different plans. One is to go under the water to get through the barrier from Zakat's castle, and the other one is to fly over it. So if you pick a Daphne, you can actually visit Jellyfish Island, where she tells Technicky and the idol kids to go and leave and stay there while her and her people work on the plan. And then you can go talk to them, and then the idol kids will be disappointed, especially Irene. And then Technicky will just feel inferior to a Daphne because you ended up picking a Daphne. And I know this not only because through not just research, but also the fact that in my first playthrough I did actually pick a Daphne. Between Technicky not leaving the best first impression, but not a terrible one per se, but I feel like a Daphne left a better first impression on me. On top of the fact that, again, she wasn't really that prevalent in Technicky's storyline. She's a lot more jerkish to Technicky in some scenes like after, but in terms of before, you don't really get that much of that. And then on top of that, not only was I just curious, not only is there an option to go under the water, and I've been shooting through cannons going through the air the entire game. The water's different. I didn't expect to look that good. It didn't. But still, between all of that and the fact that I was kind of disappointed and upset with the fact that I got one cutscene from Technicky to barely develop her, I was just like, you know what? F you, Technicky. I'm picking a Daphne. So I did. And then you can just go to Jellyfish Island, like I said, and then she talks about how she just feels inferior to a Daphne because you guys picked her. And I'm just like, if this was supposed to be so important to her storyline, maybe just don't give me the option and actually flesh it out. Because again, if it was properly fleshed out and I didn't have the option, I would feel no need to pick a Daphne in the first place. And also, I completely forgot to mention Ark, the son of Patriarch. The fact that I completely forgot to talk about him says volumes. But yeah, he doesn't really have a reason to be here. His father, Patriarch, which is the one who leaves those stupid Patriarch notes that don't tell us anything new about the game and about Galone, he couldn't exist without Ark. And the fact that Ark's father is missing is not at all utilized to strengthen Ark's character. Again, I forgot he was even in the game. And I forgot he was even in the game even though Technicky made a telescope for him, and that was Technicky's only cutscene that lost in the Inventors Contest. But she could have made something for anyone to convey the same thing. I get the idea that it needs to be something small and seemingly minuscule that Technicky invented, but it means a lot to one individual. But again, this could have been anyone, and with whatever the item was, could have ended up in the hands of someone more prevalent and make the scene much more impactful. Imagine if she made something seemingly small but significant in the lives of Bernard and Chilliam, for example. If such a seemingly worthless invention could be a symbol of love for them, or something like that, I feel like it would have hit a lot harder. Junior and Buddy's friendship and how they became friends is not something that you see much of neither. You just see a few seconds of 4 flashback images in the side quest titled A Dear Friend. This is also a cutscene that you could skip over, by the way. Grolumba has one skippable side quest titled Grumbla Gone Good that isn't even something that the story hints that you should check out, unlike a side quest like Technicky's or Bowser Jr.'s, making his even more likely to miss. There's only one side quest between Bernadette and Chilliam and their parents, titled The Empty Nest, which are also optional side quests that you can miss. The cutscene between Bernadette and her father is another example of bad humor in the game, as her father flashbacks to what he views as rebellious phase, and the joke, quote-unquote, is that he farts too much and when he eats potatoes and it stinks. Brothership's humor was bad enough, and then her father's one joke is fart humor. And unfortunately, this is not the only case where fart humor or toilet humor is something that is seen in this game. And instead of, I don't know, developing characters like Technicky, Bowser Jr., Buddy, Bernadette, Chilliam, and their storylines more, making them more important to the story, instead, most of the story focuses on telling us the exact same thing about Gloam over and over and over and over again. It's really annoying. Between the patriarch notes that you find in dungeons, cutscenes involving Zocket, investigations on islands like Slippenglide and Lotta Coins, we don't learn anything new. And this is what the game focuses on a lot of the time, when they had better stuff for the theme of this game that they could have chose to fill in the cutscenes with, but they chose not to, and it's really frustrating. Because oftentimes, the Gloam is mentioned, you never really learn anything new about Gloam. There are only two exceptions that come to mind, and that's when islanders are zapped on heat freeze by a Gloam ray by Zocket minions. And this first one is completely worthless, because learning that they used a gun to shoot their targets is really not an important thing to learn at all. It would have made much more sense if these enemies appeared right around the area where you fight the doctor of this game that you get the ant berries from, a cure to the Gloam effect, and then they shoot one of the brothers. That way you get into a battle with them, and it demonstrates that when one of the brothers has been inflicted, they won't work together. And after the battle, the doctor will come over and give the Gloamed brother an ant berry, as he happens to have one on hand, demonstrating the item, the ant berry, and how it's the cure for this effect. The Idle Kids are okay. I feel like they're one of the better characters in this game, or the better collection of characters per se. Not great or anything, but I feel like these are some of the better characters. The only one that leaves an impression individually is the leader of the group, Irene, because she's the leader and she was inspired by Peach. I don't really know why exactly, because Peach didn't really do much in this game to come off as inspirational, especially when Irene first started feeling like Peach was a role model, which was right after we found her in Marigo Island, which was before Peach offered to be a hostage and before Peach rides off to them on Plessy to find more information to help us, even though they don't find anything that's really important to us at all and helps us at all. And I already explained why she didn't do anything of importance in either instance. But it's not a huge deal because, you know, it's just childlike whimsy and all that. It's fine. Plus, she was nice to the Idle Kids, so I guess I understand why Irene was just entranced by her, but it still feels kind of weird. Besides that, there's Luke, who's the blue one, who argued with Irene about wanting to be the leader. Irene said that he couldn't because it's called Idle, and her name starts with I, so she's the leader. And then there's the yellow one, the green one. I honestly don't remember their names. All I remember about them is that the yellow one gets stuck in his hiding spot and he's slow, probably because he's the fat one, and that's supposed to be funny, I guess. And the green one who got lost in his hiding place. As a unit though, it's kind of endearing how they want to help in any way that they can. They worry about if they've been useful, but they are pretty involved. They risk their lives as test subjects for getting a rocket to hit a wall so we can cannon to one of the lighthouses, or one of the islands where a lighthouse is. Probably one of the closer attempts to almost being funny, as they go from being scared to calm as they get closer to the wall, either because they are having fun and or ready to sacrifice themselves, and maybe this could have gotten a laugh out of me with good voice acting. They are eager to help in many instances, offering to be hostages, going off with Peach to gather more data, and going off to Slippenglide to try to gather more data. Once again, these attempts to gather more data are always useless, but at the end of the day, it's somewhat endearing how they want to be helpful, in any way that they can, I suppose. So, you know what? They're okay. Now, before getting to characters saved for a section for a more detailed discussion tying into the endgame and bonds that you need for the endgame, I want to quickly touch on the fact that I've so non-subtly been pointing to, is that many storylines like Technicky's, Junior's, Buddy's, Bernadette's and Chilliam's, being something that you have the option to skip over feels very weird to me. You may say that nobody's gonna want to skip these scenes though, and you're right, and I think that makes it worse, and I'll explain why after I briefly touch on what I think the mindset was. I have a theory that the reason why these characters are so underdeveloped is because you can skip their scenes. Now, there are 4 reasons as to why I think they may have decided to go about this. The first reason is simply they just want to give you the option to skip and didn't think too much of it. But it'd just be better if you fleshed out these storylines and made it a part of the story that I had to play through. I highly doubt people would skip scenes like Technicky's cutscene, holding the wedding for Brenda and Chilliam, or following Buddy when he goes to apologize to Bowser Jr. anyway. I know I didn't, because even in simple stories, people want to like and be invested in the characters and story of a game that they are playing, especially in an RPG. If you did it because some people are more gameplay oriented and don't care about the story, you're focused on the wrong audience, because those people either won't be or shouldn't be playing dialogue heavy games in the first place. Imagine a character in any RPG that you like, whether it be Persona, Final Fantasy, Metaphor, whatever comes to mind. Alright, just picture that character in your mind. Picture a character in your mind like that got a lot of scenes to flesh them out, and this is a character that you like. Imagine if that character only got one scene that was short and heavily condensed. And imagine how much worse that character would be as a result of that decision. And that's basically how the characters are handled in this game. There are other things that you can think of a result of this, that they just didn't care, that some people don't like cutscenes, like I mentioned before, and because having different endings, good, bad, and or neutral, can be used for great effect in storytelling. To go in order of these ideas, and to start with the idea that they just didn't care, I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't say that at all, that they just don't care and that there isn't any passion, because I feel like this would just be wrong. I feel like that would just be an incorrect thing for me to say. Especially considering how they talked about several aspects of this game, in making the game, in interviews, some of which that we've gone over. In these interviews, they talk about things like making the animations, making cinematic cutscenes, the challenge you have for yourself when deciding the direction of the music, because of the musical direction that they chose to take that we talked about earlier. I don't like the music, but that's because of the direction taken, not because of a lack of passion. I feel like they've spoken very highly and passionately about making this game and many aspects of making this game. If it's for people who don't like reading cutscenes, like I said before, these people wouldn't be playing an RPG game like this anyway, so why even cater to people like this? If it's for having different endings for storytelling purposes, that doesn't make any sense, because for a Mario game to have bad endings is an idea that just doesn't make any sense for this franchise. So again, I ask, why? Why would you do something like this with the characters and just not flush out these storylines? We've checked out 4 possibilities, and I'm still asking why. Even if I was right about the first reason and it was just for the sake of giving you an option, well, just don't. Flesh out the character instead. If they're well fleshed out and well naturally ingrained into the story, I wouldn't want the option to skip it anyways. And going back to the example of just thinking about an RPG character that you like, that was well fleshed out and developed, would you want the game to skip over most of the development of this character? I'm guessing most people, if not everyone, would say no. Now, focusing on the characters, where the discussion surrounding them ties into the endgame and the bonds you will need for the endgame. First up, the Extension Corps. These guys are one of the bonds that you will need, and if you think exploring the relationship between the antagonists would be interesting, you would be wrong. There's nothing really to it. It's just them saying, sure, we'll give you a bond, since if the world ends, we end. Do the same unfunny jokes, like Shun, the green one getting cut off when he's trying to speak, and Ten, the purple one, before they start the formation, asked to switch places with the green one. Maybe this would have been funny with voice acting and better comedic timing, but it's played pretty straight, so it's not. Also, the conversation with X, the purple one, or not the purple one, the pink one, having a joke, quote unquote, where he has multiple unfunny ways of saying he's using the bathroom, and then later says he didn't wash his hands. It's more awful toilet humor and gross out humor. First Bernadette's dad, and now this. As a quick side note though, I don't necessarily need voice acting for jokes to be funny, but I feel like some of the ones they try could have benefited from it. Most of the game's jokes are dead on arrival though, as most jokes are just gimmicks that weren't funny the first time and still aren't funny the 50th. Also, if it wasn't for me looking up footage of these guys and them giving you a bond for this video, honestly, I wouldn't have even known what their names were. Even though I played this game up until the end and did several side quests as well, these guys just don't really leave that much of an impression at all individually. Other bonds that you need are Bernadette and Chilliams, which you gotta go to Heat Freeze, and there are Golem enemies here. You gotta go to Rumbla Island with Golem enemies there as well, and a Golem's Grolumba, and Islet to rescue Idol members, Peach, and Starlo from Golem enemies. Go on a dance tour with Diode and Emmett, where you have to visit and run through each location you have to visit it to get to the dance spot, and then help Buddy save Junior from Golem enemies. Not only could this have been condensed, like why do we need to save Idol, Peach, and Starlo, and why do we need to visit each individual dance spot in the way that we do? This also could have been more interesting if these islands were altered more, because as it stands, it feels like you're just retreading the same ground just with Golem enemies to find the objective. This feels like it would have been a great opportunity to use Rayclusa's powers to alter more of the areas, as this would have made this a lot more interesting than Rayclusa only altering the Mushroom Kingdom. Up next, the next character I want to talk about is the Great Conductor, who is Snoutlet's mentor who has to hide away on Conductor Island. He plays the Wise Guy character, but breaks this character, saying playing the Wise Guy is tiring and saying that he gets hungry. In a side quest that you can miss, because of course you can, he guilt trips you into talking about how he's lonely on this island and how much he wants some food. And you'll get some food, right? You'll get me some food, right? And I like this guy. He's kind of endearing, and his thing, the gimmick about him, isn't painfully unfunny, which is honestly worthy of a medal in this game. Now, the Great Conductor does give you a test to show the bond between Mario and Luigi. And this test is often just identify which brother is the right brother, basically. And how they'll do this is there are multiple different versions and tests. For example, a type of test will just be, oh, watch for the different animations. Which one is the real one? Because one will have the correct animation, and that's how you identify which one's the real brother. And there are little tests like that. And I feel like the attempts to show the bond between Mario and Luigi in this game are pretty weak, despite the theme of connections being so important to this game. Now, in order to show an example of this being done better, we can actually look at an earlier installment in the same franchise. I want you to take a look back with me to a little game called Mario and Luigi Partners in Time. The specific section I would like to look at with you in this game to show the bond between Mario and Luigi demonstrated in this game is present in a little area called Star Shrine. Once you get to a Star Gate, he will ask Luigi a question, and this question states who is responsible for the efforts that led you to this point. It's basically like that, and you were given 3 options, one of which is Mario, the other is the babies, and the third one is yourself. And after 3 attempts of Luigi mentioning these options, the Stargate will get mad, saying that he's disappointed in Luigi for not picking the correct answer, which was option 4, everyone. Now, when Luigi tries to mention that the 4th option, everyone, was not an option and the star only gave him 3 choices, the star gets mad at him again and accuses Luigi of lying on him. And this is where Mario and the baby step in to stick up for Luigi and also tell the Stargate that Luigi was right and the star only mentioned 3 choices. And then it was later revealed that the Stargate was testing them, was testing Luigi, testing the bonds between the brothers. And the scene where Mario sticks up for Luigi here, Mario and the baby stick up for Luigi here, is a scene that still sticks with me to this day. And it's a scene that I will always think about, and think about fondly whenever I think about Mario and Luigi Partners in Time. It's a beautiful scene that I always think about when I think about that game. Now, there's one character that I wish to talk about right here. And this guy was a big motivation for me making this incredibly long video in the first place. This little robot clown thing, Rayclusa, the main villain of the game. Now, what I want to say about Rayclusa is, to start off, I think that this guy, this robot clown TV thing, is really cool. Design-wise, it's pretty sick. His powers are awesome. Like, these are some really cool powers. You can make alternate versions of different areas, different worlds. You see a distorted version of the Mushroom Kingdom where all the nuance is taken out of the relationship between the Toads and Bowser's army, and it is really, really cool to see. And you want to know the best part? Rayquaza actually ties in pretty well with the themes of the game. Has a reason to not like bonds. He thinks that these bonds hold you back, and by yourself, you can do anything, which is something that he mentions as you defeat him. Now, this could have potentially been more interesting, going a little bit more into the sympathetic elements and exploring this a bit without making him redeemable, still making him a monster and irredeemable villain. Maybe we could have seen a little bit of backstory of people, Concordians, or whatever that he may have known how many ever years ago, people who he felt like held him back. Maybe they did, maybe they didn't. Such a thing would be interesting to explore, but is not really explored, unfortunately, as diving a little bit more into the sympathetic elements while still making him irredeemable at this stage, or just making him irredeemable period, because maybe he was just like always irredeemable and just became even more of a monster, is something that could have been cool, but that is not my biggest issue. Nowhere near it. Now, my biggest issue is something that I will be able to show you if we just look back for a second and look at the runtime of Brothership. Brothership's runtime is around 30 hours or so, not including, like, maybe it would be longer if you die on a lot of bosses several times, or depend on how many side quests you do, but around 30 hours runtime for the main game is runtime of Brothership. Of those 30 hours, about 4 or so, which is about 13%, is given to the penultimate area of the game. Bowser Jr. and the Koopa Troops get this section, around 13%. Rayquaza gets the last 5 or so hours, being about 17% of the game. And the rest of the 21 hours of the game is given to Zoggit and the Extension Corp. So my question to Nintendo, to Acquired, or to anyone who was responsible for this decision, I have to ask, why was Rayquaza not the main villain of the entire game? I do not understand. He works perfectly with the themes of the game. He actually has a reason to not like bonds. He could have made a lot of these areas significantly more interesting. He has the coolest powers that I've ever seen out of any Mario and Luigi villain. Why on earth was he not the main villain for the entire game? Why was he pushed back to the very end, only in like the last 5 hours? Who was in charge of this decision? Like, seriously. Now, before we get to the question that you may have of if Rayquaza not being that important, unfortunately, or as important as I would have liked, being pushed back to only the last 5 hours or so of the game really pissed me off that much. I will get back to that question, but first I just want to talk about something else, and just to make my point more clear and to reference an interview. My point is that I feel like Rayquaza is criminally underdeveloped and should have 100% been the main villain for the entire game. Now, there was a possibility, and this is where we're going to get into looking at an interview again, that he was supposed to be the main villain of the entire game, but he got pushed back only to endgame to prevent the game from being quote-unquote too dark. Which, if this was a mandate by Nintendo, I feel like this is probably nonsense, because this isn't exactly new for RPGs. And here's the interview that shows when they're talking about the darker storyline. And they talk about, after the Mario movie took a more dramatic direction, it was apparently seen as more normal or acceptable to have more darker elements and more darker storylines and darker stuff basically in the game. And again, you will be able to see in the interview and on the screen. It will also be linked in the description below. You should probably see it up there right now. And it was even mentioned by people working on it. Otani says, Osashi-san asked me if he wanted to make the story a little bit more adult-oriented, and that may have been the trigger. The past series has depicted a somewhat laid-back world, but in recent years, Mario movies has been released. It would not be strange to expect a dramatic development. And then if we go a little bit later in the interview, we see something that says this: it is certainly an interesting justification, though we question how necessary it was to begin with. The series already had dark elements, and previous RPGs have been no slouch in the villainy department. see the Shroops and their invasion in Mario and Luigi Partners in Time, anything related to the main story of Dementio's actions in Super Paper Mario, or many of the horrors found in the likes of Mario and Luigi Bowser's Inside Story, Mario and Luigi Dream Team, or Paper Mario The Origami King. And I do want to say I'm very glad that Origami King was mentioned, because Origami King is a Paper Mario game, and if you don't already know, Paper Mario has been known for getting restricted in newer installments. And if you don't already know this, you could look up interviews surrounding Origami King, because videos made by Arlo and SuperMarioT have already done this. Maybe I'll link that in the description below as well, but they've made videos talking about this topic. Case in point, Paper Mario games, a lot of the more modern ones, have had some levels of restrictions. I do think Origami King was still able to be a good game in spite of this, but yeah, there were some pretty stupid restrictions. However, Paper Mario Origami King was still allowed to be a dark game, and that came out in the same Switch era, 4 years before this game. Approximately. It came out on July 17, 2020. And in that game, that definitely had many dark elements, because many enemies were broken down painfully to be a possessed army. Toads got their faces punctured. The main villain wanted it to remove the faces of every single Toad. And when you meet him in the throne room, you see the possessed Peach that he possessed, that he killed her and spread her corpse across the throne room window. Yeah, so the idea that it's just like, oh, it's too dark, frankly, I'm gonna call BS. There's no way that you actually thought this was too dark. Maybe someone at Nintendo decided to do a mandate to just like restrict it a little bit, so it's like not the entire game is filled with Rayquaza, or maybe it was the people at Acquire, the company behind making this game, which wouldn't surprise me considering some of the other baffling elements, considering how side quests are handled and how stories and characters were handled. But either way, it's disappointing that this is what we ended up getting as a result of this. Either way, it doesn't matter. When the point is that a main villain that would have been perfect to actually be the main villain of the game was pushed back to the last 5 hours. But one more thing before I get to answering that question. You know what else could have made Rayquaza even better? The final character I didn't mention, Cosette, the mentor of Connie, who was very obviously Socket. But the Great Conductor does mention something that's interesting, and I would have liked to see explored a little bit more. Subtly mentioning the fact that she wasn't controlled, but how everyone has darkness within their hearts and how even kind people can be manipulated. Now, I appreciate the subtlety behind this, for sure. However, in order to strengthen this, it would have been beneficial for Rayquaza to actually be the main villain that he's allowed to be, to get a good amount of screen time, and throughout the course of the game, he could be manipulating other people to show how manipulative he can be. So then when this is subtly mentioned, you come to the conclusion that it's just like, oh yeah, Cosette must have also been manipulated in a similar fashion. It's not something that you really need to see, obviously, but I would have appreciated, while I don't think you need to see Cosette and exactly how she got manipulated, it would have been nice to see Rayquaza manipulating other people to show how much of a threat he could be, even more, and just be more involved in the game, especially because, once again, his powers already could make areas a lot cooler as well. Now, you may be wondering, back to the question that I've said that you might ask earlier, did Rayquaza being pushed back really piss you off so much? And if so, why? I mean, yeah, Rayquaza could have been in the story more, but just because it's pushed back at the end, was that really enough to piss you off? And yes, it was, for sure. And the reason why is because the concept of there being many underdeveloped elements that could very easily be expanded upon in ideas that are already presented in the game. So it's not something that I have to theorize too much about. It's not something that I have to make up, pull out of thin air. A lot of ideas are already in the game. So this idea of something being heavily underdeveloped or just not being touched upon at all is not an isolated incident. This happens a lot. For the story, for the characters, for the whole themes of connections and how side quests could have explored that more. There are so many elements of the game that just scream underdeveloped. You have no idea when I saw that distorted Peach's Castle and the distorted Mushroom Kingdom, or altered Mushroom Kingdom, you have no idea the amount of mixed emotions that were going through me. I was so happy, this is so cool, but at the same time I was so angry. If you had this really cool villain that could have made a lot of areas a lot more interesting, that could have worked perfectly with the theming of the game. Why did you waste my time with the Extension Corps and Zocket for the large majority of the game? You may say wasted is a harsh word to use, and my response to that is, I think it's just the most applicable term, to be honest. Because, honestly, Zocket and the Extension Clowns being the main villains for like 70% of the game is a waste. They're just lackeys who have no personal ties to the theming of Connection and don't have screen presence. So yeah, I would call it a waste. Now, to wrap up this section, part 5 of the video, there's one thing that I want to link back to, and that's the title of this video. Why did Brothership disappoint me? And the answer to this question can be summed up in one word, and that word is underdeveloped. My biggest problem with Brothership just as a whole is it feels like every single element of the game, except for battles, are incredibly underdeveloped. The side quests, the characters, the stories, the islands, the dungeons, and even the main villain of the game. Basically everything screams underdeveloped, and I'm constantly reminded of this fact throughout the game. A lot of characters just get one skippable cutscene, and that's it. The main villain of the game is only in the last 5 hours. I don't even feel like the music goes far enough for reasons that I explained in the music section. A lot of the puzzles and dungeons, islands are pretty simple. A lot of the islands are very bite-sized, so much so that none of them feel well developed at all. Even something small like the character designs, while they're great on characters like the Mario Brothers, and it's really cool to see the character designs of a lot of the Concordians looking like plugs, even characters like Bowser's minions, we didn't really go too deep into the Mario and Luigi stylization of characters like those. So even in smaller elements like those, I could say is a problem. Underdeveloped elements feels like it plagues the entire game, and it's something that you are reminded of the entire time you are playing the game. That is why I hate Mario and Luigi Brothership, and that is why Mario and Luigi Brothership disappointed me. Quick editor's note, I want to mention that yes, while the brothers are separated at the beginning of the game, this is really the only instance where a bond is really shown, seeing how much they're worried about each other. As an intro, it's good, but as the only piece where you get this, it's only a brief section at the beginning, which is disappointing. As I mentioned in the character section related to Peach, the idea of separating the brothers could have added a lot more to the experience. Yet another thing that you can say is an idea presented in the game, but it wasn't really explored. Because Mario and Luigi were separated briefly at the beginning of the game, but again, they don't really explore this any further than that. The idea that I came up with, where they're separated, but Spirit is still with them, or whatever, to show the bond between the brothers whenever they're in battles, and they do boss battles by themselves, but the spirit of the other brother is still there, helping them out, giving them different versions of bro attacks, similar to the Dreamy bro attacks in Dream Team. It's another reason why I feel like an idea like that could have worked, because the idea that the brothers are separated is something that was presented in the beginning of this game. It's just never utilized or expanded upon again. Now for the final part, for the conclusion of the video, part 6. I would like to go over 2 final questions. 1. Does the game have a pacing issue? And 2, is less development of characters really bad relative to the standards of the franchise? I'm going to be answering both of these questions, because I do think both of these questions are important to talk about. Now, in terms of scaling up, in terms of how big the issues I have with this game, before we reach the final section of the video being the conclusion, I want to touch on the take, or the claim, that the game is poorly paced to give my take on it, since not only do I believe it's important to do so, but it strengthens the point throughout the video about wanting areas to be more expansive. While I've mentioned some things that could have been condensed when collecting bonds, and how there are smaller things related to Luigi that cancel the pace of the game down a bit as well, generally, I think the game has bad pacing. I think the issue is that there's a good chunk of areas that you go to in the early game that don't have an engaging reason to why you are here, besides the fact that you just need to reconnect the island. If you really think about it, since you never really learned anything new about the Gloam and the mystery, quote unquote, behind Gloam, and how that is the narrative push for continuing the game, the early game feels a lot slower earlier on as a result of this. It's only when you meet Bernadette and Chilliam and go to islands where the family resides do islands feel like you have a more compelling reason to be there. Character-focused reason, either Bernadette and Chilliam going to heat freeze to see if they can patch up the relationship between two families, since their families butt heads with each other, kind of like a Romeo and Juliet type situation. Junior and Buddy's relationship on Off and On Island, Way Island for ant berries, and to cure the Gloam, infiltrating Bowser's castle, filled with Bowser's and his minions for it. There is some reason, story-wise, for you to be in these locations, making the player more engaged as a result of this. A lot of the game doesn't have this, however, which is why the early game feels slower by comparison. Well, a lot of islands, but especially the earlier islands. Because a lot of these islands are just, hey, you'll be here for a short period of time because it's pretty bite-sized, do this one objective, and then you're done. And then again, for some of the more expansive islands, it's more steps, but what you're doing is pretty simple, and the island itself is pretty simple. This is an issue that I feel like no other Mario & Luigi installment has, though, as they have less areas but more expansive ones with a boss marking the end of each section. While you can argue that this is formulaic, it helps convey the importance of location. And doing this, you can still make each game feel unique with different stories, locations, and characters, which each installment sets a foundation. So that foundation isn't a bad thing. You don't necessarily need bosses. Like I said, there could be character reasons being compelling aspects, but I do feel like a boss would be pretty good to mark the end of a location. So if we went with the idea with multiple islands being connected, once you get to the final area that's connected with all the other islands, there's boss battle. Because I gave an example earlier, it's just like, oh, if you still found a bunch of separated islands, but these islands are actually connected to each other. If we went with that idea, then if there was a boss at the end, then that could mark the end of these connected islands. Now to answer the question, is less development to characters really bad relative to the standards of the franchise? Not necessarily, but even if there's less time dedicated to a character, what's presented still needs to be satisfying. As an example, I would like to use Vivian from Thousand Year Door. Vivian is a character who is canonically a trans, and her story is that you get to see her getting bullied by some of her sisters. And in a chapter where Mario has had his identity stolen from Dupless, you still go out of your way to help Vivian, even though you have important things going on, like trying to get your identity back. You try to help Vivian find the bomb that was dropped. So Vivian, as a result of this, feels compelled to join you. Now eventually she does learn that you end up being Mario in the fight versus Dupless, so she temporarily leaves, only to come back mid-battle because she realizes she doesn't care about the fact that you were considered the enemy because you were nice to her and helped her and her sisters didn't, so she decides to continue helping you not only win this battle, but continue helping you on the rest of your journey instead of going back to her sisters who were mean to her. Now, naturally, you could theoretically have a trans character like Vivian go through the whole exploration phase of transitioning, thinking that if she wants to transition, going through the whole transitional phase and all that stuff. A character like Vivian could theoretically be far more expansive than she ends up being, but she's not, and that's okay, because for what she is, it is perfectly satisfying. She was given enough time and enough scenes for her storyline, while simple, to be more effective, and as a result you care about her. So I don't necessarily need the game to have a super deep exploration of characters where you spend like 10-20 hours. I don't necessarily need the Mario & Luigi games to be like Final Fantasy, Persona 5, or just the Persona franchise in general, or a bunch of other franchises like that. I don't necessarily need it to be that deep. It's a Mario & Luigi game. But notice how even though Vivian's story wasn't that deep, that's still enough. There was enough scenes for me to be emotionally satisfied at the end conclusion of her character and her storyline. Now, I do think it's fair to judge media for what it is trying to be, as this is a Mario & Luigi game, but not only do those games tell stories, not as much as another Mario RPG like Paper Mario, but I did use some examples like the Star Shrine in Partners in Time, but also Alpha Dream was adding a little bit of story to the remakes as well. Between the Goomba and the Superstar Saga remake being a little Goomba who learns how to be a leader, and Junior having an even more compelling story about being a leader the Goomba being the small little enemy that through dedication, sheer dedication, worked hard. And then Junior is somebody who was a brat, is a brat and learned how to be a better leader. And as a matter of fact, Bowser Jr.'s journey is likely what inspired the "true allies are with you for life" line present in Brothership. Also, this game is trying to add more character stories to the franchise, and while I do feel like this is a good thing, 100%, I love this, the execution, however, leaves things to be desired. That's just how I feel about that. And now we've reached the conclusion. And this is where I'm going to explain why Brothership is my least favorite installment. Well, not explain, I've already done plenty of that, but recapping. And yes, I'm confirming that Brothership is my least favorite installment. I say least favorite, but not necessarily bad, because I don't think any Mario & Luigi game is bad. Not even Paper Jam. Paper Jam is the other least favorite contender. It also has good combat, not quite as good, but it has more fleshed out areas, even if the theming of some areas is less ambitious. It feels more fun to play through, since in Brothership areas feel underdeveloped and there's nothing interesting to find once the flowers open up new paths after completing an island. The side quests also have FOMO design, as we discussed earlier, and they feel padded out, as most of them do not help expand the theming of the game or make for a fun gameplay loop. Paper Jam's little mini games and stuff do feel more naturally integrated, and overall I feel like Paper Jam is easier to enjoy for what it is. The whole idea of Paper Jam is super cool, because the whole idea of Paper Jam is a bunch of characters from the Paper Mario franchise come into the Mario & Luigi world. There's a lot of storytelling potential there, and while the game doesn't do some of these potential things, we can explore old partners from Paper Mario, see how they're doing, we can explore their stories, maybe we can have new stories with new Paper Mario enemies. Imagine Paper Mario enemies in a town like Rogueport, going to a more peaceful Toad Town, seeing how they would adapt to that environment. Especially because they're paper enemies, so it would be harder to successfully steal with weapons and stuff when they're made out of paper and you're trying to steal off of toads where the paper would be less effective. Something like that. Well, it could theoretically be less effective. Even the paper enemies that you do fight in this game still can hurt you, like the Mario Brothers, quite a bit. But the point is that there is some level of storytelling potential. However, with a game like Paper Jam, a lot of this is just me theory crafting a scenario that is a completely different game at this point. For Paper Jam, it's a lot easier to enjoy it for what it is. For Brothership, however, a lot of the ideas and aspects that I like, such as the theme of connections, ideas presented for characters and stories, and the ideas and powers shown that the final boss has, these are already things that are present in the game, they're just not expanded upon, or only barely expanded upon. As a result, I'm constantly reminded of what the game is not while playing through it. And other games in the franchise, even the first game has areas that feel more fleshed out, and they don't feel like they have underdeveloped elements, nor do they have side quests that I feel like have FOMO and feel more like padding than anything else. And games like Bowser's Inside Story, Dream Team, and Partners in Time also all have themes expanded upon to a far more satisfying effect in those games than I feel like they are in Brothership. I feel like it's fair to say Brothership is a better game than Paper Jam, but I would strongly disagree that it has a chance to be considered anywhere near the other games, especially Bowser's Inside Story, Dream Team, and Partners in Time. Do I hate Brothership? Yes, I do hate this game. Do I think it's a bad game, however? No, I do not. I feel like there are two types of hate that you would express for things in media. It's either you hate it because you think it's really, really bad, or you hate it because it just disappoints you in some way. But you don't necessarily think it's a bad work. And I do think Brothership, for me, lands more so in the second category. Brothership is a game for me that I feel is bogged down by every aspect of this game feeling underdeveloped, from the characters, stories, side quests, even things like the music. Only the battles and theming and combat, I would say, were well developed. And even then, being able to set the counter at 0 and start a recharge of plugs earlier would be something that I think could be an improvement to the system. However, I do not think Brothership is a bad game, just with a game with a lot of elements that I feel could have been so much more. Brothership makes me angry not because I think it's a bad game, but because I think it's just a decent game that could have been good, could have been great, but I feel misses the mark. However, I still do think the game has a lot of merit. Character design of Mario and Luigi, they look fantastic. Making characters designed like outlet, battle equipment items being plugs, and plugs connecting islands back together are all really cute visual ideas working very well with the fact that the theme is about connection. And while I do think the themes of connection leave a lot to be desired in execution, I think it's a meaningful theme that has merit. If you love Mario and Luigi games, if you love Mario RPGs, if you love Mario and RPGs, this is a game that I think you will probably like. Even if I didn't like it personally, that doesn't mean it's a bad game. And I think many people can get merit and enjoyment out of it. The only thing I have no problem labeling as bad are the side quests and the humor. Humor is subjective, but I don't think anybody is finding this game funny a large majority of the time. I hate the game, but as a fan of the franchise, I'm glad the game exists, and I hope it leads to a bright future for the series as a whole. I don't know what's in store for the future of Mario and Luigi, but if Acquire continues to be at the helm, I think they can improve a lot upon this game. As Acquire's take on Brothership, while I didn't like it, once again, I can see a lot of passion behind this game. Mario and Luigi look great, and honestly the character design looks pretty charming. I quite like it a lot. Games like Brothership, Wonder, Mario Kart World all have like very charming designs for like Mario Brothers and characters like that, and I really appreciate things like that. They really wanted to go all out with making cool cutscenes, cool animations. The battling is really fun. Acquire understands some things about Mario and Luigi, like the battling, because the combat is great, and I think the battle plugs add a lot to that as well, and how Luigi logic affects combat. Fun fact, Acquire, the team behind this game, have worked on another RPG franchise that you may know called Octopath Traveler. And apparently, some people who are currently on this team have worked on previous Mario and Luigi games. So, as long as they're willing to expand on some of their ideas next time, I think Nintendo has acquired a good team to take the series forward. Acquire did have an approach I personally didn't like for the musical direction and production, and they do seem to misunderstand some things about the games, being the importance of interactivity with Luigi and the humor of the franchise, but again, at its core, I see promise for a future that they can build for the Mario and Luigi games, as long as they brush up on a few things. And constructive criticism is how somebody can brush up on certain aspects and improve. Well, it's been a long journey, but we have finally reached the end of the video, and I want to thank you for listening and or watching. I truly appreciate it. I hope you ended up enjoying the video as well. If you didn't, well, sorry, but regardless of if you did or if you didn't, I hope you have a fantastic day and or night. And I would also like to wish you happy holidays as well, since the holidays are around the corner. As long as you're willing to keep things civil, I would like to hear from you. I'd like to hear about some of the positive memories you may have had with this game, if you're more positive in this game than I am, and or if this video resonated with you, and some things about the video that I mentioned that I don't like end up resonating with you, I would like to hear about that as well. In terms of making other videos like this in the future, I do think I could talk about other games in the future, but it definitely wouldn't be a video this long, at least for a next video, because this took a very long time to do, and I don't think I'll do like a 3-hour essay again on my next project. So, like and subscribe if you enjoyed, and like I said, I might make more stuff. Anyway, that's all for now. Bye.